Aloha mai kako e nā hoa makamaka mai ka lahiki a ka lākau. Welena nui me ke aloha. A malo nui no ke a koko ana o kako no ka pono o ka lahui, no ka pono o ka aina, a me ka pono o ka vai no hoi. Ea ka olelo no iao e kalele ana I ke ko'i o ka vai. Ue kalani, ola ka honua. Thank you all this afternoon for attending today's October 23 regular meeting of the Board of Water Supply. Today's Olelo Eau, or wise saying, is Ue Kalani Ola Ka Honua. When the heavens weep, the earth lives. Before beginning today's meeting, I'd like to state that our board is dedicated to providing safe, dependable, and affordable water now and into the future. At this time, we'd like to share a brief recording on reminders on public participation as well as virtual meeting regulations for board members as required by law.
Materials for this meeting under HRS Section 92-7.5 are accessible at boardofwatersupply.com/board meetings. The public may attend this meeting in person at the BWS Public Service Building, located at 630 South Beretania Street. The public may also view a live stream of today's meeting on our website at boardofwatersupply.com/live. We have been accepting written or oral testimony for today's meeting. Instructions and an online submittal form are available at boardofwatersupply.com/testimony. The deadline to submit advanced written testimony has passed. Testimony received by noon today have been distributed to the board members. We will continue to accept written testimony today through our online form. Oral testimony in person or remotely will be accepted during today's meeting. To facilitate as much in-person and remote testimony as reasonably possible during the time allotted, pre-registration and submittal of a written version of testimony at boardofwatersupply.com/testimony is strongly encouraged. To testify in person, please register using our online form or come to the Public Service Building at 630 South Beretania Street. We have a representative in the lobby to provide intake and further instructions. To request to testify remotely, please complete the online form at boardofwatersupply.com/testimony. Requesters will receive an email containing links and instructions to join the Zoom session. Testifiers will have 2 minutes to state their position. A timekeeper will alert testifiers when there is 1 minute remaining. Once the 2 minutes are up, please summarize to allow time for questions from the board. Then make room for the next testifier. Board members attending any board meeting remotely must be visible to the public to be considered present and meet quorum guidelines. Board members participating remotely must also disclose their location and anyone present at their location during roll call. Meeting participants who are calling or video conferencing in, please mute your microphone when you're not speaking. If you have a question, comment, or wish to enter or second a motion on an action item, please unmute your microphone and identify yourself before continuing to speak. If you encounter technical issues during today's meeting, please use the Zoom chat to send a direct message to our support team. Their names are listed in the message to all participants. To open the chat window, please click on the text bubble icon on the Zoom toolbar.
Let's take a moment to take roll call of the board members. When I call your name, please say aye. And if attending remotely, make the appropriate disclosures. Vice Chair Sproat.
I am attending remotely from my home office and I'm alone with the door closed.
Board Member Andaya.
Oh, aloha. I am remote. I am actually in my vehicle alone. I'm not driving. But I'm in my vehicle.
Board Member Jonathan Kanashiro.
Here.
Okay. Ed Sniffen is excused for a little bit. I think he's joining us in a few minutes. And Board Member Jean Albano is excused. Okay, also in the room with us today are Manager Ernie Lau.
Aloha.
Deputy Manager Erwin Kawata.
Present.
Board Secretary Joy Cruz Achu.
Here.
Manager Secretary Kim Kawai.
Here.
Information Specialist Stephen Nordstrom and Wayne Maria. Wayne, thank you for that beautiful rendition of the 6-minute video off the top. Joining us by Zoom are also Jeff Lau and Jessica Wong, both from the City and County Corp Council Department.
Present.
Oh, present. Thank you. Good to see you, Jeff. So just because we have a packed house today and a number of important things to discuss, we're going to take things out of order. Just for the sake of everyone's time, we appreciate everyone being here and coming to present in person. So what I want to do is I want to move items for information up to the top. So number 2, discussion, the Board of Water Supply report to the board of the Permitted Action Group and the role of the Board of Water Supply rate study process. We're going to move that to the top, and I'm going to turn it over to the managing director to come and present some testimony. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Board Chair Anthony and board members. Mike Formby, Managing Director of the City and County of Honolulu, and also recognizing Manager and Chief Engineer Ernie Lau and Deputy Manager Erwin Kawada. Thank you for this opportunity to come today. There's no formal ask today. I'm here just to give information to the board. I think you'll find that on November 27th at your meeting, the mayor may come and may make a formal ask. But for now, I just wanted to give you information, and I appreciate Manager Lau, who has guided me as I've been talking to him about this issue, and it has to do with the timing of a rate increase. And I wanted you to be aware of what the city has done on the city side, as the mayor and I understand that the decision to increase rates is solely the province of the board and not that of the mayor or my office. So we just wanted to share information with you. And I wanted to start by saying that we still recognize the impact of COVID and the impact to many of our households, including the households that have relied on a program called the Rental and Utility Relief Program. We call it RURP. And to date, RURP has given out in direct assistance $240 million to 20,176 households, and that continues to this day. And what happened in the last week, which I think is very significant to the timing of a proposed increase, is that the city and county filed our housing plan with the city council. And the purpose for that was that we had allocated another $5 million to the rental and utility relief program. And that was triggered by the submission of the housing plan. And with that $5 million, we're anticipating that direct assistance payments will be able to go through March or April of 2024. And after March or April of 2024, there are going to be a lot of households on Oahu that are going to find no direct assistance in the terms of rent or in utility relief. And after that, we have $7 million that's set aside for housing stabilization. That's for mediation. That's for lawyers to assist those that need legal assistance. And it's also to give them counseling. But from March or April after, for a period of months, and that will go to 2025, we think this is going to be a period of economic stress for people on Oahu. And so to that end, in July of this year, July of 2023, the Department of Land Management, which oversees 20 affordable housing projects on the island of Oahu, came to the mayor and I by way of memo and proposed that we increase affordable housing rents to match current HUD guidelines. So in other words, our rents are currently below what HUD allows us to charge. And in July of 2023, they proposed a very modest increase of 3 to 5% per housing project. On average, that would have been somewhere between probably $30 and $50, $60 per month. And the mayor and I deferred on that and decided that we would not consider a rent increase until October of 2024. And we did that because we believe there are a lot of Alice population households that are challenged right now. So that was the second consideration that I wanted you to be aware of. So, and there's 1,200 units minimum in our DLM, affordable housing portfolio. So I think what I wanted today was just to share with you also the money that the city has given through allocation through the FRF, the Federal Recovery Funds. And I have a handout that I'm willing to leave. Chair, if you're able to accept this, I'll leave it with you for the board members. But basically it shows that to date, the Board of Water Supply has received the single largest infusion of federal recovery funds to the tune of $42,165,975. And that money has been given at the request of the Board of Water Supply. And we're very thankful that Manager and Chief Engineer Lau and Deputy Manager Kawada came forward and made these requests. But the point is we were able to infuse this money into the Board of Water Supply. And we would like you to consider that as well when you deliberate on the timing of your proposed increase. So that's really what I'm providing today. It's information. It's not making a request at this time, but I do anticipate the mayor may come in November and actually make a request. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Manager Lau, any questions?
No, we just appreciate the FRF funding, Managing Director.
Of course.
Putting it to good use in CIP projects.
That's right.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair.
Any other testimony, Madam Secretary, on this subject? I didn't see anybody. Just want to check if there's anybody online.
No, Chair. We don't.
Okay. And we have Joe Cooper, I believe, here today. Present.
Hi, good afternoon. Chair, Board Chair, or,
Board Chair, I think
we will, yeah, our presentation of the PIG report.
the pig result.
Yeah, is that right?
Yes, is that, so where we're
Yeah,
at?
yeah.
Okay, so yes, we presented the PIG report, at our October meeting. And we have Dave Eversold here to, lead us in we open the floor for discussion of the permitted interaction report. And we have Dave Eversold here who will, provide some, presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, actually, the permitted interaction group report was submitted last month. And for this month on the agenda item, it allows for members of the board or former members of the permitted interaction group to discuss their report that was submitted last month, which I can, that included board member Kaneshiro, board member Ondaya, and former board member Soch.
Yeah.
If it pleases the board chair, I can give a summary of the report.
Yeah, and I can turn it over to Board Member Kaneshiro if he has anything to add.
Or a board member Ondaya.
Yes.
So the permitted interaction group was formed to attend community meetings, listen to testimony, and discuss in depth the proposed 5-year rate increase. The first meeting was held with the BWS rates team on July 11th, and they discussed the overall proposal and the community outreach schedule. Pending community input, they affirmed their support for the proposed rates and the new agricultural waiver and the Kapuna direct install program. There were 4 community information meetings with a total of 21 attendees. And Jonathan Kaneshiro attended 4 of those meetings, and member Max Sword attended 1 of the community meetings. On September 6th, the permitted interaction group members met to discuss that community input. In general, the meetings were informative to the public and the rate proposal was well received. The BWS rates team reported on 5 neighborhood board meetings. The common questions at these meetings were the desalination plant, Red Hill, the tiered rates for non-residential customers, conservation initiatives that the BWS is undertaking, and the separation of sewer or ENV rates from our water bill. Overall, the public reception has been positive. The BWS rates teams continues to meet with neighborhood boards and to accept comments through October 15th. Actually, we are still accepting comments until the board meets. The PIG, or the Permitted Interaction Group, also discussed the proposed waiver for new farmers and the Kapuna direct install program, both of which have been well received. Finally, the Permitted Interaction Group felt it was important not to delay the rollout of the new rates past February 1st, 2014. And that's a summary of the Permitted Interaction Report. And again, it's open for discussion.
Any comments?
Yeah, I think understanding that we need to set rates for the next 5 years and knowing that we need to maintain our infrastructure and do it in a balanced way. We need to maintain safe, affordable drinking water, dependable drinking water. It's really a balancing act between the rate increases and how much we can pass on to our customers. So I just wanted, I think in the presentation, we set rates, but we also did it in a tiered way, such that we can alleviate some of the stress on the lower quantity users. I think that was very well received in the presentations that were made at the stakeholder advisory groups, as well as the neighborhood groups. So we will continue to take in recommendation, and thank you, Managing Director, for the new information. But I think overall, what we've seen thus far, at least what I've seen as in the big groups, is an acceptance from the community on the rate proposal, and generally well received by people who've attended the meetings and the presentations. But with this new information, we'll kind of digest it and see, if there's any other comments or information from the mayor's office or for the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian, you're part of the PIG. Do you have any comments?
Yeah, my only comments, and I echo, Board Member Kaneshiro's comments. My only comments is that, we did deliberate at length about all the different factors and tried our very best to balance and be sensitive of, the ongoing economic struggles that people may be having. So, everything else, one thing we also took a notice of is with all the different economic factors that are going on, namely inflation, and the costs that we have to deal with as an agency. Inflation affects everyone. So those are things that we considered. But we always are welcome to any further feedback. I do want to thank Managing Director for letting us know the information as well, and look forward to receiving more information as appropriate. But yeah, that's the extent of my comments at this time.
Thank you, Board Member. Yeah, Managing Director, thanks for coming out today and providing some feedback on both the kind of the current state of affairs as the city sees it, as well as just reflecting on some of the support that the Board of Water Supply has gotten. I think we've been also seeing the effects of the pandemic, as well as the recovery after the pandemic in varying ways, in who's able to pay and who's not, and how that there's been some lag in getting some of these folks who have been delinquent. For your information, we didn't shut off anyone's meter over the course of COVID. We wanted to make sure that people had access to water. And maybe Ernie, I could turn it over to you to just talk about, and maybe Ray, just some of the constraints that that we have given where we are with some of the CIP projects that we have access to and the like.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Like everybody else too, we're faced with increasing challenges to operate the water system that supplies safe drinking water to about 1 million people every day on Oahu, and also supports our economy. We're very sensitive, and as we go through this, maybe Ray can bring up your PowerPoint. We actually prepared a short presentation in anticipation, maybe some questions from the board. So this is just a consideration, if the board chose to defer the potential rate increases. But I think this slide says it all. It's kind of this balancing act to provide safe and dependable water service to our community every day, every hour, every minute, throughout the year. And also keep rates affordable, because the Board of Water Supply is financially self-sufficient. We get, and thank you, Managing Director, for bringing up the $42 million in FYF funding. We really appreciate that. And that contribution is actually factored in to the revenue we have available to implement our capital program. So we really appreciate that. Mahalo. The challenges are that safe and dependable, it's really something that we must be able to do. And it takes a lot of infrastructure to do that. So how do you balance that with affordability? Because really, when people pay their water bills, that's the source of the revenue to pay for the operation every day, every hour, every minute throughout the year for our island-wide water system. And without an adequate source of revenue coming in, it really puts large challenges in how to provide that important critical service to our community and yet balance that with affordability. So what we, in this rate proposal, vast majority of our customers are actually residential customers. The biggest number being single family homes. And also those that live in apartments or townhouse type of projects. Those are our residential customers. They constitute most of over 150,000 of our 170,000 customer accounts island-wide. And those are the customers that have some of the greatest challenges of being able to pay, especially our kupuna. So the way that we try to balance this between providing safe, dependable water to our service to our community and keeping rates affordable, especially for those that are most challenged, is to create a tiered rate structure. A tiered rate structure actually recognizes and provides that first 2,000 gallons to our residential customers at below the cost it takes to provide that water. So we're really trying to keep that rate very affordable. And what we call this first tier the essential needs tier. And we'll talk about it later in the discussion when we get into the discussion about authorizing a public hearing. But then we have customers, and about 3% of especially our single family residential customers, use over 30,000 gallons a month. And those customers use more than 3 average homes. An average household in our system uses about 9,000 gallons a month, and a 30,000 plus customer uses over 3 times an average household. So what we're trying to do at the same time on the lower end, encourage affordability, but also start to motivate water conservation on the big water users. So we're trying to create this balancing act. We want those large water users to move more toward using less water. And the way our rates are designed, it's set up so that the majority of the costs on a water bill, and I want to point out too that when people get a bill from the Board of Water Supply, please take a close look at it, because for most of our customers, they get actually 2 bills. They get a bill that we're doing as a service from the Department of Environmental Services for their sewer charges, and from the Board of Water Supply for the water charges to the Board of Water Supply. And for most, like myself, 1/3 of my total bill I get from the Board of Water Supply is actually the water charges. And these proposed rate increases only apply to the Board of Water Supply portion of the bill, which is the smaller portion. And our rates are designed to motivate our customers and give our customers greater opportunity to control the bill by using less water, and they can reduce their water bill, not the sewer charges, but the water bill. Our fixed charges on the water side is small compared to the total water bill. And we've done that on purpose to encourage our customers to use water conservation to try to manage their bills. So I'll just turn it over to Ray. So again, it's this balancing act between safe and dependable water service to our community 24/7 and being able to keep rates affordable. It is a tough balancing act. And I tell you, I'll just say, Chair, I really struggle with this. Yet I need to accomplish providing this critical service for our community, not only today, but also for years to come, for future generations that are not even here with us right now. Ray?
Thank you, Manager. So as we consider moving forward on the rates, I just wanted to highlight we've struggled as well with inflation, but over fiscal year 22 to 21, we were able to bring our total operating expenditures down by 7.5%. There was a greater than 20% increase in power and pumping costs because of electricity costs, which is one of our largest cost factors. But to accommodate or work around that increase in power and pumping, we cut everywhere else that we could. Our rate study carries forward a very lean O&M budget into the next 6 years. We're not increasing rates so that we can exponentially grow our budget. We're keeping it lean as we move forward. These are the rates that we are proposing. So it's 10% on February 1st, 10% on July 1st, and then every July thereafter, 9, 8.5, 8, and 8. These rate increases will generate about $550 million in revenues that are needed to operate the BWS. As manager mentioned, as a semi-autonomous agency, our rate revenue must cover not only our operations, infrastructure investments, it must also provide for fiscal stability. So manager mentioned that we are expected to provide uninterrupted service 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That requires operating reserves, or what we call working capital. It's very important when facing fiscal emergencies that can result from emergency repairs, droughts, natural disasters, and unforeseen economic influences. So our rate making should align with our long-range financial planning and water master plan. As this board will remember, we revised our working capital policy the last time we did our rates. And we strive for a minimum balance of 60 days while targeting 180 days of working capital. The proposed rate increases will allow us to build up our working capital so that we can be prepared for, just prepared in general, sorry. So that's just a chart, but in days, the current rate proposal is already balancing, at the direction of this board and the permitted interaction group, we're balancing affordability with risk. The first 2 years, even with the 10% increase on February 1st and July 1st, we will be dropping below the 60-day floor on working capital. We're at 47 and 43 days, while we strive again to build back up sufficient working capital to allow us to be resilient and to provide the services that we need to provide 24/7 from now into the future. If you were to consider just deferring the February 1st rate increase, that has a compounding effect and will never, the expenditures projected by the board, which are modest, we started with a lean budget and we're moving that forward over the next 5.5 years, we'll still never be able to recover, and our revenue base will never match those expenditures. If we were to do we played with other scenarios for the board as well to consider. If we implemented February 1st, but then deferred July 1st, or if we eliminate both February 1st and July 1st, 2024, and then don't increase rates until 2025, what you're seeing here in red is the overall fund balance. So we'd go into the hundreds of millions of dollars negative over this rate period, which undoubtedly will decrease our bond rating, making affordable borrowing very difficult. So we obviously couldn't go into the red. Our rate revenues are the only thing that sustain our operations. We can't overspend what we don't have. So to maintain solvency through any eliminations of the rate increases would require deep cuts to our water system, operations and investment. So we need to cut tens of millions of dollars each year of critical O&M costs and capital improvement investments. This would result in delays to necessary repairs. Our customers would see prolonged water outages, deferral of preventative maintenance programs, so you'd see increased water outages, and the inability to repair and maintain pumps, water mains, and reservoirs, which would ultimately lead to the loss of safe water supply for drinking, hygiene, and sanitation. Also, eliminations of our rate increases would additionally threaten disaster preparedness, mitigation, and our ability to respond when these things happen. And then just for you to mull over in closing, the willingness and commitment of this board to independently prescribing appropriate rates has had a positive financial impact, and we thank you for your support over all these years. But we, in March of 2023, received AAA bond ratings from both Fitch and S&P. And Fitch was the one who upgraded us this past year. And just a couple of highlights from their ratings report dated February of 2023. The strength of their revenue defensibility is rooted in our independent rate raising ability. And they looked at our planned capital spending, and because we've been increasing investments in our system, we should ultimately reduce the age of our assets. And because the board has the independent legal ability to increase service rates without external approval, it's allowed us to support capital financing programs based on our plans through the water master plan. And just a couple of snippets from what S&P, who for 2 years in a row has affirmed their AAA rating of the Board of Water Supply. So they believe it reflects our robust financial metrics and best-in-class management policies and practices, which have allowed us to respond to Red Hill from a position of strength. And S&P's expectation is the board will continue making necessary investments in its infrastructure to meet these long-term climate and supply demands. Additionally, the S&P feels that our rate setting, or the policy and practices of our rate setting, they deem to be strong. Our process promotes transparency as we move forward and consider rates. And we did pursue, or we're pursuing, a multi-year rate increase supported by a third-party cost of service study. So S&P believes our rate setting practices contribute to our very healthy financial performance. So thank you. Available for any questions or further discussion.
All I have to say, MD, is that I'd like to see if we can schedule some time to come together to talk about what might be possible. I think there's obviously the fine balance here, and we want to make sure that we have the ability to talk through what some of the timing of this might be. We're at the razor's edge. I think it's great in some respects that we're a semi-autonomous part of the city, and there's sometimes where it's not that great. We do appreciate, again, the dollars that came in through the recovered funds, and want to make sure that we get this right.
Can I make a couple of comments?
Absolutely, sir.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Chair. Mike Formby, Managing Director again, and I appreciate that briefing, which we've seen a little bit of already. This has not been hidden from us, but I would just say that it is a balancing act. And that's what we're asking this board to do. We're asking you to look at the specific months, even if you don't put it off to fiscal year 25, look at the months that you're proposing, February and July, and how that impacts the Alice population, those that are on our relief programs, and the counseling that they're going to be going through. And if you can make adjustments between the February and the July, I would at least ask you to look at that so that you make a fully informed decision. And would also point out that the Managing Director's Office leads up the preparation of the city's $4.5 billion budget, $1.2 billion CIP budget. For someone to say that we will never recover if we defer the beginning of a rate hike is simply an improper statement. And so with all due respect and saying it as professional as possible, that is simply not true. To say that we will never recover if we make a balance and move the initial start dates. You can recover. You can recover during healthier times. So it's just a matter of going back and looking at your scheduled increase and when it would kick in and what those increases would be. But I don't think this board should accept a representation that if you make adjustments in the beginning, you will never be able to recover. Anybody that's worked a budget that involves operating in CIP funds knows that's simply not the case. So with that, I'll leave it to you. I came here as an informational presentation today, and I thank you for your time. Thank you, Chair.
Yep.
Actually, Chair, I have a question for the Managing Director before he leaves, please.
You have a question? Sure.
Apologies for
Yes.
calling you back, but thank you so much
That's
for your
okay.
time and aloha and sharing this information with us. I wanted to ask what you would propose with respect to a delay.
So I didn't come with a proposal today. I came with information. I've been having this discussion with Manager Lau and Deputy Manager. I've been telling them up front that we have serious concerns. And so I think when the mayor comes in November, if you would like us to actually make a proposal, we can. But I would tell you that we don't have the information that you have because you are semi-autonomous. I just think our ask and mayor's ask in November will be that you simply run the numbers looking at other months. If our $5 million gets us through March or April of 2024, and these families are then coming off of these assistance programs, look at some other scenarios and see how you can recover in the out years versus in the near years. There is obviously the ability to recover.
Okay, that's very
And so,
helpful.
yeah, we're happy to bring more in November, and I can work on that. Thank you for the question.
If I could, if we could, meet in between this meeting and the next to sit down and kind of go through some of the numbers. So you have a little more information that's, you know, to look at. I mean, I think it comes down to like, well, what else do we got?
That's right.
And then, get to a place where, you know, there's just a, you know, basis for, where we're at and how we came to that.
I agree. And the other part that I know the Board of Water Supply is very good at, and we're working to be better, and that's the federal grants that are out there. There's a lot of money out there. We're doing a lot of work in the system, and we tend to not budget grant availability into our budget. We tend to look at it as a windfall once we get it. But I think you can approach it from a mindset of, if we're going to defer the initial, you know, revenue rate hikes, that we need to go out and be aggressive about grants so that we know we're going to get more money.
Yeah, that's been a topic of discussion at almost every meeting that I've been here. So
I'd be happy to meet with you, Sherry.
thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll call. Thank you so much. Moving on to item for information number 1, update by the United States Navy on the defueling and closure of Red Hill bulk fuel storage facility and remediation efforts. Wait, just as a precursor, we just want to thank you for coming in person today and bringing all the smart people with you in case you have any questions. We appreciate all the staff coming out for this and for you to come in person. I think it's we tried to think back as to when the Navy had actually come to present here. It's been some time, so we appreciate you spending some time with us today.
Well, Chair Anthony and board members, Mr. Lau, Mr. Wada, ladies and gentlemen, it's really an honor to be here. Again, I am the commander of Joint Task Force Red Hill. I work for U.S. Indo-Pacific Command. We also have Navy representatives here. I know it's a little confusing because I'm a naval officer, but I'm in a joint capacity here. But the board has asked for a Red Hill update. If we go to the next slide, please. Just want to draw your attention to the lower right column. You're all familiar with the timeline of how we got here with the spills in 21 and what transpired. But the problem at Red Hill, it's multifaceted and multidimensional. So my team, the Joint Task Force, was created to defuel the facility, to remove the threat that which lies above the aquifer. The defueling sets the conditions for closure. And then closure obviously is important to secure that facility. But then there's a long-term environmental remediation that is already in progress, but will continue for years to come. And then there's a medical piece. The 3 representatives here will cover the 3 bullets. We'll give an update on defueling, the closure effort, and also on environmental remediation. So on defueling, my mission, we go by orders in the military. This is taken right from my orders from the Secretary of Defense himself. And he established the Joint Task Force, put me in charge. I'm accountable, responsible for the safe and expeditious removal of the fuel from the facility. And in doing so, to rebuild relationships with the community, with our elected officials, with the interagency partners, things that have been strained over the last couple of years considerably, given the circumstances that took place. Defueling is the right thing to do, as the Secretary of Defense has said, for many, many reasons, not only for the people of Hawaii, but our military families and the environment. What I'd like to do is, and I know there's a lot here, so just listen to me here. When I took command about a year ago, I committed to build an approach that was methodical and that was deliberate. And we went through what's called a requirements assessment methodology to determine what we needed to do, a 1 to N list based on federal and state law, the state of Hawaii emergency order, the 15 consent order from the EPA, and at the time, a year ago, a draft consent order that the EPA was working, which was codified this past spring. We then put together a plan and then a schedule, and then my commitment to everyone in Hawaii was to stay within the bounds of federal and state law and within safety, but to see if we could accelerate the timeline to start to defuel earlier than what was originally projected when I took this mission over, which was to start defueling in February or early March of 2024. And I'm proud to tell you all that we commenced defueling last Monday, the 16th of October. And just a little plug for our app, but our app was just updated. And as of 2 o'clock this afternoon, we have safely removed about 22 million gallons or 21% of that fuel. So we're making a lot of progress. This picture here is the integrated master schedule that got us to where we are today. All the milestones, all the gate reviews, all the assessments that were required. I've called it a symphony, bringing in different pieces of equipment, instruments at different timing, tempo, speeds, level of amplitude to get us where we are today. This has been a whole of government approach and also a multi-sector industry approach. On the Department of Defense, numerous organizations and commands involved. At the federal, state, and local level, a number of activities ongoing to get us the resources that we need, but also the oversight, which is mandated by federal and state law. That's the Environmental Protection Agency and the state of Hawaii Department of Health. And then on the industry side, we've got repairs, safety, fuel, and environment. So a team of teams approach to where we are. And let me just be clear. We still have a lot of work to do to remove that fuel. And the Department of Defense commitment is to get every last drop out of the facility. So this is just a simple graphic to highlight how we are defueling. And draw your attention to the left. That is one of the tanks. We have 20 tanks in the facility. These are huge, 250 feet in height, 100 feet in diameter. You can fit the Statue of Liberty inside with room to spare. The process is fairly simple, although it's very complex. It's like going to a water cooler and opening the valve, and the water comes out because of gravity. And that's essentially what we're doing through the pipelines, either to tankers on the pier or for just a short couple of days throughout the defueling period to fill up the upper tank farm on Joint Base Pearl Harbor. You see that call out box to the left, to ensure that there's sufficient fuel for operations and training. As you know, we live in a dangerous, complex world, and we need to keep our airplanes flying and our ships steaming. The major effort of the defueling piece will occur from the 16th of October to the 18th of November. By the 18th of November, we should have 98% of the fuel out, and that is about 102.5 million gallons. This was what our update was on Saturday, but as I told you, I just got the update and we're up to 22 million gallons. The next phase of defueling is to get the bottom of the tanks. Right here, the tank at the bottom, there's a larger fuel line, and that's what we're using for the requirements of the fuel. But when you get to the 10-foot level, we have to use a much smaller line, which is about 4 inches in diameter. And so it's just a little bit slower to get the bottom fuel out. But this will occur from the 4th through the 15th of December. So same principle though, it'll come out through that pipe into the main pipelines and then down to tankers at the hotel pier. Then what we will need to do is to remove the fuel from the pipelines. This is the exact procedure that we did about a year ago when we removed fuel from the pipelines before we commenced our repairs. And that is currently scheduled from the 15th through the 19th of January. Essentially, use gravity. Gravity will take it down to the lower portion of the tunnel, and then we will use pumps to pull that fuel into the upper tank farm on Joint Base Pearl Harbor. So the plan right now is to have the fuel out using gravity and the pump action at the very end by the 19th of January. What I want to do just very briefly is highlight that our detailed planning has been focused to reduce risk. This is a very complex operation. This facility is over 80 years old. And we've applied a multidimensional approach to reduce risk. And the whole purpose is to reduce the likelihood and then the severity of a mishap. And we've applied multiple layers here. And I won't go into details. I'll stand by for questions. But if you looked at the investigations from the May and the November 2021 spills, the big so what is that the procedures were not exacting or specific enough. There was a lack of procedural compliance and some supervisory issues. There were training issues for the fuel operations, and there were training issues with respect to the ability to respond to a spill. All those findings, all those recommendations from those investigations have been included into our plan, to include the plans which not only are exacting using consultants from the fuel and safety industries, but also approved by the Department of Health and the EPA. An aggressive training program, a test management program to go through every piece of equipment, test it multiple times, different procedures, and while we're doing those procedures, ensuring that we have a safety and quality assurance program to ensure that those tests are performed to standard and also reviewed by the regulators to provide their oversight. I've talked at length about the repairs, enhancements, and modifications which were mandated by the state emergency order. Those have been completed, and they too were focused on reducing risk and improving safety, and then a robust quality validation program to ensure that every repair was done safely and to standard within another testing regimen that was critical. And then on the fuel operations side, again, significant training, rehearsals, tabletops in the presence of the regulators to ensure that we're safe and ready to go. If I were to sum it up, the culture at Joint Task Red Hill has been to create an organization that is continuously improving, to bring in the best people, to ensure quality supervision, to respect the risks that we face in executing this mission, and then aggressive assessment, inspections, audits to create high velocity learning so we keep improving and then exacting precision and execution in our duties and responsibilities. But even though we're doing everything to reduce risk, you have to assume that something may go wrong. And equally, has our efforts been on reducing risk, we've focused on ensuring that we're prepared in the likely event that we have a mishap, whether a spill or a fire, or to prevent someone from getting hurt. And in doing so, we've been working with the Department of Health and the Environmental Protection Agency, but also at the state and local level with our emergency responders, with HIEMA and the Department of Emergency Management. We've built a robust training regimen. We've done numerous drills with our interagency partners. And on top of that, we have also selectively put in over 400 protective measures to ensure the safety of the aquifer, whether it's going through inch by inch, sealing every crack, going through and sealing every drain, containment under every valve, absorbent material, flange shields, barriers, sandbags, pumps. There's a lot of engineering here, but I just want to inform the board and the public that we've worked exhaustively to ensure that we've, again, made ourselves as prepared as ready if we were to have a mishap. Next slide. And as I've committed since I took this responsibility over, is that we must communicate, we must engage with the public, not only explaining what we're doing and why, but our continued listening. Those efforts will continue. I highlighted at the beginning our app. We have over 20,000 downloads, and that number is growing. It's on the iOS and also Apple platforms. We're pushing out updates daily. We'll continue to engage with the public. events like this, all of our oversight responsibilities, our website, everything that we can do to assure and reassure the public on our status. And this is my last slide, and this is just what's next. And many of you have heard that when we complete gravity defueling, there'll still be some fuel left. And that's because gravity can only get you so far. If you go into your kitchen and go below your sink, you'll see the catch, the bend in the pipe, and there's always fluid in there. There's over 180 low point drains in the 3.5 miles of tunnel. There's also bends. The facility is over 8 years old, and there's been some sagging in the pipelines. Not a concern, it's just a fact. And so we, at the FTAC in June, highlighted that when we had done our last supplement, that we believed that we had approximately 100 to 400,000 gallons of residual fuel left, but we would do exacting surveys and we would continue our mission analysis to determine where this fuel is. And we have completed that assessment. And thankfully, the amount of residual fuel is on the lower end of that estimate, and it's going to be 64,000 gallons. And through the environmental laws that we have received, we can remove 60 of the 64,000 gallons, and we're going to start removing that fuel with our Navy partners as soon as gravity defueling ends. The remaining 4,000, though, are because of sags in the pipe, and we will have to destruct the pipeline to be able to access that fuel. That will require environmental assessments. That will also require specific and detailed approaches to ensure that not one drop enters the environment. So that will likely be part of the closure process. And then lastly, at the tanks themselves, because of sediment and time, fuel leaves what's called a sludge. And it's a semi-solid liquid material that is an industry standard, has to be removed. There are certain environmental laws that are required for that. That also takes several months in each tank, and that too will be part of the closure process. In the middle of November, the Department of Defense will put out another defueling supplement, which will codify the amount of residual fuel, how we will go after that, and then what will be remaining for the closure process. And I look forward to having that come out, and then we'll brief at the FTAC with the specifics. So I'm complete. I'm now going to turn over to Admiral Barnett, who will then cover closure, and then Captain Sullivan will go after Admiral Barnett to discuss environmental remediation. Okay, thanks.
Just for the record, you'll notice slide 6, there was a difference than what they reported. Thank you for giving us the updated numbers. Also for the board secretary, Director Sniffen signed on at 2:50 p.m. and board member Brian Mdaya signed off at 2:54. We've had quorum. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, and good afternoon. Glad to be here. Glad to be in front of you. I want to talk to you a little bit about the, I know this is a lot to read, a lot to see here, but I just want to give you just a synopsis of what we're actually doing here for the Red Hill Tank Closure Plan. What you'll see in front of you here is 4 phases. And then we'll explain a little bit on the side here what the brown box and the lines mean. And Captain Sullivan will also talk a little bit about this in our process. But this is the Red Hill Tank Closure Plan. And this plan is in 4 phases. Phase 1 is the planning for the permanent tank closure. So what we did was November of last year, in November 1st, we sent the first iteration, because this will be an iterative process, particularly based off the lessons that we learned from working side by side with the Joint Task Force. But on the 1st of November of last year, we submitted this to the EPA and the DOH for their review. So we're in continual talks with the EPA and DOH. A lot of times when we're talking with them, much like with the defueling plan, they may request a supplement for an update. But like I said, that was submitted on the 1st of November of last year. And the intent is for us, as we roll out of phase 1, to be awarding contracts for the tank closure plan. So that's tracking. And I will also tell you that the first 3 phases, phase 1, 2, and 3, we're doing concurrently together and also on a not to interfere basis with the defueling process. So we're able to also be jogging behind the defueling effort to make sure that we're doing what we need to be doing for closure. Phase 2 which is annotated here by the darker green box, that's to explore potential reuse options. Now, I'm sure that you've heard about that. On the 14th of July of last year, in a meet and confer meeting with DOH and policymakers from the Navy and DOD, we were recommended, to look at some non-fuel potential reuse options for Red Hill. A contract was awarded the 31st of January of this year to Nakapuna. And when we awarded the contract to them, we requested 3 different things from them. 3 reports. The first report, we'll just call that a soft sounds report. What that was is that's just when we're just talking, or Nakapuna is talking story. They talked about 30 individuals about that. And what that did was that kind of gave them a vector, so to speak, or, hey, what are we dealing with here? That fed into a qualitative survey. A qualitative survey was on the Nakapuna website. About 900 individuals went to that website. They used the survey there. And that was posted well, the result of that was posted on the 7th of September. So that's the qualitative. The soft survey and the qualitative then fed into our current initiative right now, which is the quantitative survey, which is being done by Nakapuna. That's in progress right now. I'm hoping to get a final report from them sometime towards the end of November, the beginning of December. And they will have a wrap up and a roll up for us. The Nakapuna reports, those 3 reports will be combined. We will bundle that up. We will also send that, we will send that report along with 2 other reports to the policymakers in DC, the Secretary of Defense, for him to brief Congress on or about February or March of next year. The other 2 reports, one is an Office of Navy Research funded report to a study to the University of Hawaii for non-fossil fuel reuse options. And the third report was a National Defense Authorization Act add by the legislative branch of any other non-fuel reuse options inside of DOD. So those 3 will be bundled together, and the Secretary of Defense will be briefing Congress on that, and that's where the decision will come for if there's a potential non-fuel reuse of what it will be, and that's an if. Phase 3, which is the lighter green box right here, that's the preparation for tank closure. That's the things like materials, staging, training. Obviously, we don't want to stage any material there while the Joint Task Force is busy getting the fuel out. And we're also going to start working on spill exercises, making sure that we are updating our response program if needed, based on the lessons learned from the defueling efforts by the Joint Task Force. And finally, what you'll see is what we're all waiting for right here in blue is the implementation of the permanent tank closure. That's when we're going to close all the 20 tanks there. We're going to remove, this is very important, we're going to remove all 3 of those pipelines during that phase right here. We're also going to close the 4 surge tanks. And then we're estimating this will be for supplement number 4. That'll be sometimes in the middle of June, where we will have that final closure plan. But we're still going to be starting the cleaning and doing things like that as we run towards that final closure supplement, which will be due to the regulators. And all these items are posted, and we will make sure it's posted. That should be the summer of 2025. What you'll see right here is things that I talked about. That's the long-term monitoring and the site assessment and the release investigation. Big takeaway from right here is that we're going to be running the whole time through this process. We're not stopping our remediation of Red Hill when we get here. We're going to be here for a while to help get everything right. So that's a continual process that's going on from now, as you'll see, from phase 1 all the way to phase 4 and beyond. That's it. I would like to turn over to James here.
Aloha, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Captain James Sullivan. I'm the commanding officer of Naval Facilities Engineering System Command. So I really have 3 roles that I play here with supporting Admiral Wade in all the defueling efforts, any repairs, any NAVFAC related requirements that support the defueling. And then I also support Admiral Barnett with 2 different areas. It's ensuring the safety of the Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam distribution system and all of our water, as well as the remediation and recovery of Red Hill, remediation of all the contamination, as well as recovering the quality of the aquifer. The first slide that I want to discuss is about the Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam, the long-term monitoring program. Following the events in November of 2021, the interagency drinking water team got together, and the agreement was with the Navy, Department of Health, Army, and the EPA. They developed a long-term monitoring program, is what you see on the slide here. It's broken into 7 different periods, and it consists of a total of 7,800 samples that will be taken. So we are currently, as you can see through the wheel on the right-hand side, that we are currently all the way into period 6. We have conducted about 7,200 of the 7,800 samples that are required. But one thing that is, in addition to all of the homes that we are sampling during the drinking water, the long-term monitoring, there is definitely a focus on the schools, the child development centers, the medical facilities. And in every single period, we test every school, every medical facility, as well as every CDC to ensure the safety of the drinking water. We also have a rapid response team that is available 24/7. So if any resident has any water-related concern, they can contact the EOC or the Emergency Operations Center, and we would immediately dispatch a team that would go to the site, look for anything that's unusual, conduct the rapid test that looks for any TPH that we can get results within an hour. And then if there is still a concern with the resident, we will add them to the long-term monitoring and take an LTM sample that we send off island to get those results. To make sure that we are very, very transparent and everybody has the information, the EPA and the DOH, we have access to the real-time information as it comes in from the laboratory, but then we also post all of that information on the Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam Safe Water website, where we have it broken into 2 different sections. We have the drinking water section of the Safe Water site, and then we have the environmental section where we keep all of the information for our groundwater monitoring wells, as well as any soil samples, really everything that is not tied to the drinking water system. And we always want to make sure that there's a clear distinction so that nobody gets confused when they see results if we're talking drinking water or if we're talking groundwater, because we all know that those are different tests as well as we're doing different methods. You know, as Admiral Wade had talked about, I mean, rebuilding the trust with the community is a big part of my job and my responsibility. So this slide is intended just to highlight some of the recent activities that we've gone, where we have this table we put together, where we will bring a computer, we'll show what the LTM testing equipment looks like, explain what happens when one of our contractors comes into your residence or to the schools or CDC and conduct the sample. And then on the computer there, we will walk through any questions that the resident may have. We'll show them how to find their individual results, the results of their neighbors, the results of the school, really any information. So I've always got a team of my outreach personnel, as well as there's many of these events that I would attend myself. So if you look at the bottom left-hand quadrant of the slide here, these just points to some of the recent activities, the recent places where we've set up our booth, answered questions. This has been a very, very valuable tool, just making sure that people had the opportunity to speak to anybody if they have any questions, so that we can show them how our website works. On the right-hand quadrant of the slide, the bottom corner, those just show some of the upcoming events that we will be participating in. We always do it at the exchange as well as the mini marts, but we're willing to go to any venue if there is interest in us coming to a town hall or coming to any forum. We will gladly bring the team and answer any questions that anyone may have. And then the bottom right-hand corner shows just again that Joint Base Pearl Harbor, the Safe Waters website, how to get to that. So shifting from the drinking water system, going into the remediation of Red Hill. And I know this is an eye chart, the intent, I'm not going to go through the entire slide, but just to show you, these are the remediation activities that have gone on at Red Hill, as well as what will continue into the future. And one thing that I want to reiterate, the commitment we've made many times, the Navy is here for the long haul. This is while some of these efforts are short-term remediation, we are conducting a site assessment, and the Navy is absolutely committed to the recovery of the contamination that was caused by Red Hill. So we will continue many years after we finish the defueling and all of the immediate remediation efforts that are in progress. So just pointing a couple of items that I do want to highlight on this slide is, if you look over at the top left, this is talking about all the monitoring and the sampling efforts that we have, the groundwater sampling, the soil vapor sampling that we're doing. right now actively underneath all of the tanks during defueling operations twice a week. We're checking that as well as continue with weekly monitoring of the groundwater network in the vicinity of the tank. Right below that, Adit 3, this is the location where most of the fuel was spilled in the November release. A lot of efforts that have been focused on how do we characterize where the fuel is and get after that. So these are all of the different options and vehicles that we use to try to chase down the fuel and recover as much as possible, and we'll continue. We have several pilots we continue to work on, soil vapor extraction, air sparging, any technology. We're interested in any other ideas that people might have to continue to chase after any fuel that still may be trapped between the surface of the tunnel and the top of the aquifer. Below that is where we actually get into some of the current remediation efforts. Like I mentioned, the soil vapor extraction that we're currently working to set up that soil vapor extraction equipment. And then we are continuing to do direct recovery. We are running the GAC to maintain a capture zone, the GAC, the granular activated carbon. We are pumping from the Red Hill shaft and going through the GAC, but that is to maintain a capture zone to where we are recovering any products that may exist on the surface of the aquifer. That has gone down to, we are getting less than a teaspoon a month is about the quantity from which we are actually pulling any fuel from the aquifer right now. Below that, talk a little bit about the AFFF release that we're all familiar with that occurred last November 29th and the remediation efforts. One thing to note on that remediation is we had the initial immediate response where we worked directly with the DOH and the EPA to ensure that we had all gross contamination and then encapsulate the site. But please note that we are going to continue as soon as defueling is complete, as part of the long-term remediation and the site investigations that are being done at Red Hill. We will be going back after the site of that spill to continue to remove soil and to remediate any AFFF that may still exist up in the Adit 6 area. We continue with modeling efforts. We have both the Navy is working modeling efforts, and the University of Hawaii is also working modeling efforts that we are supporting them to just understand how the hydrology and any flow of contamination from Red Hill, where that might go. So we'll continue with those modeling efforts as well. And then the bottom just highlights all of the efforts that we're doing to support Admiral Wade in making sure penetrations remain sealed at all time, and the groundwater protection plan, which was really our measures and any response that we would have to take in the unlikely event that there was a spill to occur at Red Hill. Pending any questions, I believe that concludes my portion of the brief. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any questions?
I have a quick question, Captain. Just based off your last couple of minutes, but so that the GAC is capturing fuel from the groundwater a teaspoon per month?
Correct. Yes, go.
So it's about a teaspoon per month.
Yeah, if you go back to a year and a half ago, when we turned on the GAC, it was in January of 2022. At that point, there was a visible sheen on the water, as well as we had pillows down there. We continue to have a skimmer that is operating 24/7 that is on that shaft. So the intent of maintaining and pumping from the Red Hill shaft is to maintain a capture zone. So any contamination, we want to pull it towards that source. We are pumping from about 18 foot below the surface of the aquifer and then running that through GACs. But by pulling any water, we continue to collect. So we collected several hundred gallons early in the remediation effort. But that is slowed to very, very minimal. There's no visual sheen, but we continue to run those skimming operations and have some of the pillows are basically absorbent pads that are down there to collect any fuel that might still get there. The only time that we ever see any sort of sheen recently is if we have a heavy rain event, or when we were doing some drilling operations or something in the close proximity that might have freed up some product that then got sucked in by the capture zone and pulled towards our skimmers and all the operations that's going on.
I just have a follow-on question to that, don't mind.
Yes, sir.
I just know the geology of Oahu or the islands is so complex, and defueling is very important, but has there been any success or advancement in the groundwater modeling? And
So-
figuring out, exactly what can you expect as you start to do more pumping and, because that's, still there.
And one effort we did, it's not a complete model, but to ensure that we informed prior to defueling is we pushed to get the best available model that we had back, I believe it was in the June or July timeframe. And we submitted that to the regulators as well as, Mr. Lau, and shared it with everybody. That is far from a complete model. We continue to work that model and to develop that model that will be complete later this fall. But I say complete, it'll never be
Very
complete.
complex, right? Yeah.
Correct, as well as University of Hawaii. We continue to work very closely with them. There's this tracer study that we're excited for them to complete. So we'll give them all the information and continue to collaborate closely with the USGS, University of Hawaii, obviously BWS and CWARM on that effort.
Thank you.
So I guess I'll ask a follow-up. If you're just pulling a piece one a day, then is the 4.7
A month.
I mean, I'm sorry, a month. If you're still pulling the 4.7 million gallons a day, is the idea behind that to keep the plume or whatever's there pulled in?
It is, and there's actually, we've conducted a pilot and we have requested formally to the EPA and the DOH. We believe that we can maintain that same capture zone, only pulling an average of 1.8 million gallons a day. It's not a variable pump to where we reduce the pumping. It means that we shut it off and we only turn it on 3 days per week, spaced out over the week. But it equates to 1.8 million. We've got all of the report together, and we continue to work with the subject matter experts at the EPA and the DOH to gain approval to reduce our pumping from that 4.3 to 4.7 a day that we're doing now, to drop it to an average of 1.8 million gallons a day.
And then just to follow up on the
Can I just to
Sure.
be fair to our interagency partners, the DOH, they're aware, they're also very concerned about the amount of water that's being pulled. But they want to make sure that we keep the consistency through defueling, just in case an unlikely, event. And then they're continuing to look at the request to hopefully gain approval. So I think they're working it aggressively, but I think they're just concerned while we're defueling.
Sure. Okay, thank you. And then just as a follow-up, and I'll turn back to numbers, the comment you made about heavy rain, we saw the spike in whatever monitoring well that was, is that number 6, after heavy rains. Do you have any other data that points to like what happens for heavy rains when you start to see a sheet again, either anecdotal or?
A lot of times we have seen the same thing, that after a heavy rain or some unusual event, we will from time to time see a spike in a specific monitoring well, a slight sheen, anytime we have that spike, we're looking for reasons why, and that's what we typically have discovered, that it is related to you're pouring additional water, things are filtering through, and it's lodging any petroleum TPH that may be trapped and getting into the well.
And then any other data you have about drilling operations that have caused that as well? We'd love to see that. I think, John mentioned it as well, as just the geology of the area is so complex that we're trying to figure out, one, how much oil is still encapsulated in the rock, and then what triggers it. There's been, I think, robust discussions both internally and externally about that, so we're trying to get as much information as possible.
And some of the efforts that we've done to identify any layers of El Napa. So we have identified there are a few thin layers of fuel that we believe exist, and that's the air sparging and the soil vapor extraction. That's why we're really getting after and focusing on those areas to try to push air through and suck it back out. But all of that information, I absolutely will make sure that we keep it updated on the environmental section of the Safe Waters website, is where we keep all of the monitoring well data, the groundwater, any documents that we have on the drilling construction. We would submit all of those. I believe they're all on there. I can verify, but I believe those are all also included on the environmental side. I know it's a lot of documents.
Yeah. Actually, on that note, just a little bit of homework for general, if you could. I just saw in this listing, and thank you for this slide, it's super helpful, that there was a revised plan for the groundwater protection plan in September 28th. If you could just point me in the direction to that link later on when you get a chance to. Thank you so much. Members, any other questions? Vice Chair Sproat.
I believe this question is for Captain Sullivan as well. Thank you so much for the time and information. I had a couple of follow-up questions about the well. You mentioned that you were pumping at I think 18 feet. I was wondering whether there has been any discussion or consideration of pumping at different levels, because pumping from the surface is one thing, but we don't fully understand how the groundwater system works. Some fuels float, some fuels sink. And so we're wanting to make sure that we can get whatever we need to from wherever it is in the water column. So just wondering how you're planning to deal with that.
Within the groundwater monitoring wells, some of those, we are taking samples at different levels. But when I refer to the 18 feet, that is the actual Red Hill shaft, and the infrastructure, the pumps, the pipes, those are all set and have been there for 40 to 50 years. So we are not changing or really don't have the ability to change that infrastructure and to pump from different levels. But when it comes to actual groundwater sampling, those are the type of discussions that we do have with some of our quarterly SME and monthly meetings that we have with, again, BWS, the Board of Waters, or the Seaworm, USGS, and to make those recommendations on, are we sampling from the right height within those groundwater wells that we have? And should we drill groundwater monitoring wells to different locations? Like some of them, we may have one that's closer to the surface, and the recommendation might be to drill a deeper well. So those discussions can continue today and will continue into the near future.
Right. But I guess as a follow-up to that, I understand with the current configuration, you're limited in what you can do, but has there been examination of varying the configuration of the pumps or putting in different pumps, even looking at different wells that could pump at different levels within the water column?
We have not to date, ma'am. It's something I guess we could discuss in the future.
Different options are pump and treat to capture a fuel that might be in the aquifer.
Sure.
In the environment.
Okay.
Yeah, I just did some, and I could be off by a zero one way or another, but I just did some rough calculations. We're about 660 something days in from turning on the GAC, and it looks like we're just north of 31 billion gallons of water down the stream. I would support the idea that you want to keep pumping through defueling, just in case. But we'll be approaching 35 billion gallons of water down the stream there. So we want to make sure that we come up with, if you're getting a teaspoon a month, we will come up with a better set of solutions for that as we go.
Understand.
Yeah, thank you. Members, any other questions? Kapoor, your hand is still up.
It is. I have a couple more. I was trying to be.
Go ahead.
Okay. And I'm not sure who this question is for, but I was wondering whether your rapid response team or outreach personnel or anyone else has received any concerns within the last, I don't know, say 2 weeks or so about the quality of water from your drinking water system?
So there have been concerns that are brought up that the EOC throughout the last couple of weeks, as defueling has started, there continued to be a lot of awareness and heightened emphasis on our drinking water quality. So we have we track very closely, and just in the last week we have tested 5 additional houses. We went out to the house, did the rapid response. Those came back as non-detect. We took an LTM sample for which we have submitted to the mainland. We have had several discussions with the DOH and the EPA just to make sure that we're fielding any concerns that they also may be getting from their residents. So to answer your question, yes, recently there has been definitely a lot more awareness as we started defueling. As you might imagine, there's a lot of angst and a lot of concern as we get moving forward. So
yeah, this is Albert Weed. We understand for sure the angst within the community, and every concern that has been received is moved out quickly to test, but not only military, Department of Health, and in fact, the Department of Health released a statement, I believe, on Friday evening on their tests and what they found. So That's really important too. And we'll continue that throughout the defueling process.
Thank you. I'm wondering, in the concerns that have been lodged recently, have there been any specific concerns about physical reactions to the water in the Navy's drinking water system?
Do you know that with the specific, I think there was, sheens, and then I think there was someone complained about a rash.
Right, I think there were, one family saw, and a lot of folks understandably don't really want to reach out to the Navy because they feel, in retaliation or things like that. So a lot of times then we get information through secondhand. So that secondhand is obviously a very trustworthy secondhand. It's EPA or DOH. And so received phone calls. And this weekend I was actually talking to Amy Miller on some concerns that other family members had. But back to the previous case, some family members saw what they thought was a sheen on the inside of a glass of soda. Another one thought they saw something, spots on an item out of a dishwasher. And then another family member had saw a rash on a couple of their young children. So I believe DOH, and I can't really speak for them, I believe DOH and responded actually to the house there also, and EPA, in addition to our teams immediately, once they felt comfortable telling who they were and the addresses, we immediately at the senior level got over there and did the rapid test, and then followed up with a long-term monitoring option, which then is sent off island. So we're trying to be very responsive to that, to our family members' concerns, and just to anyone's concerns that's on the water system.
Absolutely. And when do you expect the results, the longer term results from the monitoring, from the people?
7 to 10 working days or when we usually get those back. But like you said, for the
expedited.
right, and we ask obviously for the expedited, get it quicker, faster, funnier. But the best thing though is we have that for a peace of mind, we can give that rapid test right there, which checks for any TPH product, which works. I think we've had about 400 of those tests, for about 402 of those rapid tests, and all of them have come back in line with the long-term monitoring program too.
Right. And so just to clarify, those rapid response tests are only for TPH though, right? Only for,
Right.
Correct.
right. So only, okay.
And then if it warrants a long-term monitor, if we take a long-term, then that goes for the complete list of analytes that we test as part of the long-term monitoring. So it would not just be for TPH, that'd be the whole suite.
Right. So how many of those have been sent out?
The long-term monitoring, we're at 7,200 tests so far, 7,200.
Oh, sorry, I just mean within the last couple of weeks.
Within, well, we would have done the 5 of them in the last week. In the month of September, I think there was only one additional one that was requested
Right.
Via the emergency response, or the rapid response.
And on our Safe Waters website, it shows, I think, September results. We show a month at a time, so we should be updating here shortly to show the October. I think September was only one, but right now, I think we've had in the last week we've had 4. Then we had depends on when you call your week, so we've had less than 10 so far.
In the month of October.
In the month of October, so.
Right. And is that usual, 10 for the month of October? Or is that, you said you only had 1 for September?
It was actually higher than.
October was higher, I think partially because we were I think that, with the start of defueling, I think, folks are a little bit more concerned. But previous to that, I track that and usually get those at my every Friday morning briefs. Nothing had popped as a huge outlier or a huge spike. We kind of expected it for now, so we're focused to respond as required.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
did have another question about the groundwater modeling. So
Yes, ma'am.
could you, and I'm curious both about about both models that are being done. And you mentioned that the info was shared, but would be shared with everyone. But I was just wondering for a little bit more info on the timetable. I saw what you presented on the slide, but I couldn't get the specifics.
So for the groundwater modeling effort that we're doing, we provided the best available model at the time. We provided that, I believe it was in the June, July timeframe. I don't remember the exact date. And then we will continue with our modeling effort. I believe the next product is due in 2024. So probably about the summer of 2024, I guess, is when we will present the next version of the Navy's modeling. But as you can see from the University of Hawaii groundwater, it looks like their model is going to be done in early the third quarter of 24 also. So really those are running parallel efforts. I can get you more specifics. I apologize. I don't have all the details on exact deliverables for those models, but I can take that as a due out if you'd like those dates.
That would be fabulous. And for UH, that's a tracer test, right?
But it's more than a tracer. A tracer is part of it. So the tracer test is something that they will be utilizing as part of their overall groundwater modeling effort. We were also, one was going to be included in the Navy's version of it, but the UH and working with the regulators, we did not want to cause any confusion with tracers. And so they requested that they only do the tracer study.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I would love, if you don't mind, I'd love more information.
Yes, ma'am.
Deliverables and the timetable. I think that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Members, any other questions? I just have a couple of follow-ups. And actually, General Kumar, I'm gonna come back to you, like, not in the setting for just some clarification on remediation efforts, this specific stuff. So I'll come and bug you later. But I
Chair, if I could, just to make sure we understand who's responsible for what. So the Joint Task Force handles all the fueling. And then the closure and environmental remediation is Navy Region and Captain Sullivan.
Understood.
Yeah, and so whatever questions you want and we'll answered, we'll work together with you and get those to you.
Yeah, General's been my
Yeah.
handler, so
Okay.
I usually just siphon.
Oh, okay, I got you. He's working it behind the scenes.
He'll come back and get stuff. from
Okay,
you.
I'm sorry. Thanks for doing that.
He doesn't have any of the access. He certainly helps me get them when I need them. So
Excellent.
I understand that. There's
Thanks, Chair.
different pieces of the puzzle here.
Yes, sir.
I appreciate that.
All right.
Thank you.
Yep.
So just a couple of questions. You know, when we're talking about like all of the different data sets that we have access to, I notice in here that there's skimming that's sometimes diver supported. Are you still sending divers down in the shaft?
No, sir. The divers, that was in some of the immediate response back in that November through January. We did have divers that we sent in at that point, but we're not sending divers anymore. It's all done through skimming operations.
Okay. I'm just wondering if there's any availability of, you know, you mentioned the sheen earlier, but whether or not you can see anything on the rock, either photographically or.
So we have done two different times. We sent an unmanned submersible that went through the tunnel and has those videos. So I believe those videos are also on the Safe Waters website, but I can verify that. But it was at two different locations. We sent the remote operating vehicle survey, and that was done in the fourth quarter of 21 and again in the second quarter of 22. So we do have all of those videos as well.
I'm wondering if you might consider doing an updated one.
We can look into that.
Also, at some point, right, you folks are in, and I don't want to get ahead of myself because I know that there are a number of tasks here that are undone with defueling, but at some point you're in engineering to set up a more permanent GAC structure to apply to put that water back into the system in Pearl Harbor.
Correct. So we have a military construction project, which is a P716, which is a water treatment facility for the Red Hill shaft. And that project, while we're still working through the proper MILCON processes, that would utilize the similar GAC technology. We've already completed the design. That design is under review right now by the DOH, as well as we're working temporary, prior to the MILCON being complete, having a temporary system just like we have there right now that could bring and return that capability to use that water as opposed to dumping it into the lava stream. But obviously a lot of coordination that must occur prior to any of that occurring.
So that's several years out, you think?
The interim solution could be year singular, while the MILCON would be multiple years. And then the temporary solution could serve until the MILCON is complete. But there's still a lot of work that has to be done on both of those.
At one point, you had mentioned that you're going to remove the pipe from the tanks coming out. When you say that, are you talking about like all the pipe or just like big sections of it, or
All three of the pipes,
all three of the pipes are going down?
all the way down.
Okay.
So that's, you know,
Okay, thank you.
yes, sir.
And then last, I think I just have one last question. And maybe that's for you, Admiral Wade. Just when we're talking about the JTF,
Yes.
when you expect it to stand down and transition operations into another structure?
That's a great question. So the formal transition of the Joint Task Force standing down and turning back to the Navy is under deliberation at the Pentagon right now.
Okay.
This will be a Secretary of Defense decision. I expect that this decision will be in this new supplement that'll come out in the middle of November. But we're working very closely with our Navy teammates. Every process that the Joint Task Force has put in for safety, for security, and also for community engagement is being scrutinized to ensure continuity of operations so that when the Joint Task Force does disestablish and the Navy takes it over, that those procedures that have been installed to reduce risk and also better communicate and listen to the community will be kept.
Appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
And before I let you go, I think there's a couple of pieces of testimony, so I'm gonna have you say just through testimony. And
Absolutely.
Release you folks, but before I get off and I'm gonna turn it over to Ernie in a second, before I get off my soapbox, I did want to say that we have appreciated the attention to detail with respect to the JTF, and I was only kidding about General here. He's been super helpful in just getting us information as we need it. I know Ernie's been able to get stuff expedited through Admiral Barnett, and so we appreciate you coming here today. We appreciate the up-to-date daily information that you brought and for making the time with staff and yourselves to come out. So thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. I'll pass that to my team. They're working very hard. So thank you.
Turn it over to Manager Lau. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, folks, for coming out. I know there is maybe a testifier that signed up to testify. Just a question, maybe Admiral Wade. On the, just to be clear, after JTF Red Hill is done with defueling, how much will remain in the facility for closure? And I think it was, please correct me if I'm wrong, it looks like about 4,000 gallons of residual fuel in the pipelines.
Correct.
And maybe 28,000 gallons of sludge.
In the tanks.
The tanks itself. So about,
Sir.
is that about 32,000 gallons.
Correct.
Of sludge and fuel
Right.
filling the facility.
And we will know exactly where that is. And the reason why it is likely going to be closure, again, the Secretary of Defense is going to make this decision here imminently and be codified in this update, is that process to remove that fuel and the sludge is a much lengthier process. And it also requires environmental assessments that are coincidental to the removal of the pipeline. And there's controls that you need to put into place to ensure that there's no introduction into the environment of any of that fuel. So whereas the residual fuel that we can get out with 60,000, you can enter low point drains without destructing anything. For primary and secondary containment, I briefed you on these procedures. This would be a different procedure where you'd have to drill into that pipeline to remove that fuel.
More destructive.
Yes.
Removal of the fuel.
Yes, sir.
Which comes first? Removal of the sludge from the tanks and then the pipelines, or the pipelines and then the tanks?
That's a closure sequencing question.
Yep. Sludge first.
I would believe.
I believe, and I'll wait till the engineer that's going to be, like I've told you, I'm an engineer, but I'm not a professional engineer, but I can get back to you, but I believe it'll be the sludge first and then followed by the pipeline. So, and that will be done during the tank cleaning process of when they're getting that out.
And, I was glad to hear the good progress has been made on defueling. Thank you, Admiral Wade. And so about 20% or so. Any leaks or spills or that you have to deal with during this first 20%?
There's been no spills. On day one, on the 16th, we had minor leak from one clay valve during our pre-start procedures. But as we've briefed you and the community, every valve has primary and secondary containment with absorbent pads. This was not unexpected since the fuel was out of the pipelines for several months. So as soon as we saw the minor leakage, we immediately isolated, contained everything, not one drop got into the environment. We restored system integrity, got the Department of Health and EPA approval to continue, and then we continued with our process.
Okay, and
That
then,
was in the, sorry, that was in the.
And it was also in the underground pump house, well below where the aquifer.
number one.
Yes.
And the aquifer protection strategy, I know you kind of briefly went through that slide, but for the benefit of the board, what is the gist of the aquifer protection strategy?
Sure. Michelle, would you mind doing that? This is General Link. She's deputy commander, but she is also the senior engineer on the team.
So it's kind of multifaceted. And so the strategy is one both to protect the aquifer and the environment. So when we talk about protective measures, what we went into the facility looking at for any soil vapor monitoring or any monitoring points that could be a preferential pathway. We put additional measures on top to seal those off in the event of a spill. We put barriers to redirect, again, in the event of a spill, looking at the aquifer, moving fuel if it were to leak away from the aquifers as quickly as possible. So that was one element of it, as well wrapping flanges, putting protective measures over the dresser couplings, putting secondary containment on underneath all of the mechanical valves. So the larger valves have like a type of tent that's underneath that goes into containment. So any point within the pipelines where there could be a potential leak, a flange, a valve, those were all wrapped. Any point starting from tank 20 all the way down to the underground pump house where there might have been a crack or something over a French drain, those were sealed except for every 10th crack, or I'm sorry, every 10th French drain. And that's because we still have to manage rising groundwater levels and balance that and avoid any kind of flooding scenario in the event of a rising groundwater. So those measures were put in place, again, sandbags on top of materials, on top of those locations, and as well the diverters. And the diverters are a 20-inch, a fairly high diverter as well. When we looked at a worst case planning scenario in the event where you had more of a spill, ensuring that it wasn't going to run over. So that was coupled with response actions. So working with the EPA and DOH, we have leveraged pumps within the facility. So the pumps, the AFFF reclamation pumps, those are part of the multi-layered response plan. So looking at zones within the facility and the ability to reclaim fuel in the event of a mishap as quickly as possible so that it doesn't linger inside the facility. What we didn't want was to inadvertently create a secondary problem where things were sealed off or the fuel was sitting in a location and then permeating into the concrete in a location where we couldn't respond to it. So we've leveraged pumps within the AFFF, the former AFFF zones, to do quick reclamation. We have added what we call their soup salve, but it's a salvage type of organization that we have those pumps that are down on the underground pump house. So again, tracking movement of fuel throughout the facility with the goal of getting it away from the aquifer as fast as humanly possible in the event of some sort of spill. So both protecting what is there, reducing risk in the event of the spill, and then having response measures to move that fuel away as quickly as possible.
Okay. Thank you. And maybe just one last question for Captain Sullivan.
Yeah.
Thank you, General Link. Actually a couple of questions. So I know I asked this at the subject matter expert meeting in the Red Hill Remediation Roundtable that EPA and the Department of Health created, was the issue of PFAS testing at all monitoring locations, monitor locations.
Right.
I just noticed recently EPA released their AFFF report on their website, Region 9. And they indicated in that report that they would be requiring PFAS testing at all locations.
And we have. So we immediately following the November release of the AFFF, we selected 9 monitoring wells that were the closest to surround that site. We conducted weekly testing of the PFAS at those sites. And then in September of this year, we did a complete sampling of every groundwater monitoring well that we have. So we anticipate sometime within the next few weeks, I hope, we should get the results for PFAS sampling of every groundwater monitoring well. And we'll continue with the monthly PFAS sampling of, again, the 9 closest to where that site occurred. So we did a baseline in September.
So am I interpreting this correctly? Then the PFAS sampling at all locations only one occurred in September, but there's no plan to do that on a recurring monthly basis
And
at all locations.
that is true. Right now, there is
So the EPA's
baseline.
requirement wasn't clear then? Did they require you to sample? Because PFAS, as we all know, the nickname forever chemicals is there forever in the environment. And there was quite a bit that leaked out or spilled on your adit 6.
For the decision for the one-time baseline, that was made before the EPA report came out. But this is a policy discussion that I'll have to elevate up to.
Admiral Barnett
policy
could
level.
request my recommendation, and I've said this, I think, since it occurred in November of 2022, that immediately should, testing at all locations on a recurring regular basis should be done to monitor potential migration to other areas. If you could.
I'll talk. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I'll start talking.
I appreciate that. And then one last question. I know for Board of Water Supply, we've been kind of based on the contested case hearing and the documents that we could see, that we kind of estimated maybe around 180,000 gallons of past leaks at the Red Hill facility, which has been around for about 80 years. May I ask, what is the Navy's best estimate of total leakage from this facility over its 80-year history?
I'm not aware of the full total amount. What I will tell you is, though, based on the chart that we showed you earlier for the remediation that we're going to be doing phase 4 and beyond, we're going to get at whatever we find there. But I can look at the historical item
as
for
well
you.
as the site assessment for the long-term remediation. It's a several-year process to complete that full site assessment, but they go through the entire history of the facility, where every facility used to be, where old buildings used to be, where old tanks, as well as a history of any potential leaks in all those reports. So all of that is part of the long-term site assessment for the remediation of the site. All of that will be included in that.
So there'll be in the future some quantification of the total volume of releases that are well documented or poorly documented. Because to deal with a problem, you have to understand what is the problem, the magnitude of the problem, how much needs to be kind of cleaned up and where it's located, how you can get it out of the environment. Because once it's left the tanks or the pipelines, it's in the environment. And from my limited experience with fuel contamination issues, it could be there for a long time. And move with the groundwater. So
let us get back with you on that, particularly with the particulars of that, what the site assessment will and won't look at. But I understand where you're going, sir. I'll make sure we.
I appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Madam Secretary, do we have any testimony on this item?
Yes, Chair, we have one testifier waiting to testify.
Okay, let's get
Okay, yeah.
lean in.
Okay, yes, Chair, we have one testifier, Miss Meredith Wilson, who's being admitted to provide testimony. Then Miss Wilson, please wait to be recognized by the chair and make sure that your camera is on and your microphone is on. Mahalo.
Hello, Ms. Wilson. Thank you for your time and for your patience. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Aloha, my name is Meredith Wilson, and I lived in military housing at Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam when our water was contaminated with jet fuel from the Red Hill Bulk Storage Facility. And in just 2 days, on October 25th, that will mark 2 years since this whole nightmare started for my family. That's the day I began to experience nauseating vertigo, incessant migraines, vision difficulty, life-altering anxiety, and a giant shift in my perspective. I used to blindly trust that drinking water would flush out toxins, and yet it was the very thing introducing such horrible poison to our brains and bodies. There is no substitute for pure water. I'm still very concerned about several major items regarding the newly consolidated groundwater monitoring program, and this ultimately affects BWS as well. Number one, does BWS agree with the now monthly instead of weekly sampling for groundwater contaminants based on the May 2023 NAVFAC consolidation plan? Number two, does BWS test for ethylene glycol or any other antifreeze analyte? And would you support that this be added to the contaminants of potential concern list for the Navy's groundwater monitoring plan? Number three, what is your stance regarding the recently relaxed PFAS EAL levels from Hawaii Department of Health, especially considering the federal lifetime drinking water health advisories for the four main ones with the most substantial available science? For example, PFOA, they suggested 0.004 parts per trillion. The EAL from the Hawaii Department of Health in December 2022 was 6 parts per trillion. Now, as of April 2023, it is 12 parts per trillion. That is 3,000 times higher than the federal lifetime advisory. And as for PFOS, that's 385 times higher than the federal. We're going in the wrong direction. And lastly, as an example of more like opaque transparency, the JBPHH Safe Waters website displays data from locations with relatively high TPH sums, and yet states that they have 0 TPH detections for the month of September. That information is incompatible and could be seen as deceiving. For example, there's a sample from September 23rd at a location measured 103 parts per billion TPHD and 79.4 parts per billion TPHO. So that needs to be seen as a TPH detection, although it is under the 266 level. I pray that the defueling process continues safely and you continue to hold strong in all the fronts that you have to face. Mahalo and ola ikawai.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you very much. Members, any questions? And we'll get back to you on those 2 questions. We'll have staff.
Actually, maybe we, everyone think we can discuss the responses for the earliest questions? Yeah, thank you. Chair, if
Sure.
Meredith, we're going to take the best stab at responding to your questions. But some of them may require more follow-up, like the reasons behind DOH's changes to the EAL on PFAS.
Yes.
Hold on. Erwin Kawatan, Deputy Manager.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Board Chair, Board members. Hello, Meredith. With respect to the first question, for us, if sampling was done weekly, our recommendation would be continue to doing it weekly because you're collecting information. It's giving you long-term data that's going to help you understand any kind of changes. And we already know that the monitoring wells over at Red Hill have shown historically and continue to show different levels. And so those kinds of differences, if you continue to monitor more frequently, can help you inform and better understand, what is characteristically happening within the environment and help inform future, mitigation strategies. So we would recommend continuing to do that weekly. With respect to currently ethylene glycol, the board currently does not do ethylene glycol. We are looking at some test methods that can help us measure for that. And I'm going through a process now to validate those methods so that I get consistent results. But as far as ethylene glycol, that should continue to be analyzed with respect, including things like, fuel additives, surfactants, things that have been used in the past. Because again, it's about information, and the more you understand about what's present, the better you'll be able to characterize and figure out what needs to take place to help mitigate it. With respect to the PFOA, the Lifetime Health Advisory that EPA came out was essentially that. It was an advisory. It is what is called a maximum, equivalent to a maximum level goal. So it's about where you want to be. But the technology also where you want to be also has to be consistent with your ability to get there. So ability to treat and ability to measure. And a lot of times, oftentimes, what is ultimately put as part of a standard incorporates those 2 things, ability to treat, remove, and ability to measure. and still be protective of public health. So EPA has proposed a maximum contaminant limit for PFOA and PFOS, both at 4 parts per trillion. That's the standard. That's the measurement stick that you should apply here until those standards ultimately get finalized. Because at the end of the day, we're looking at groundwater. We're looking at a water source that ultimately used for drinking. So drinking water standards should apply wherever possible. And then finally, with respect to transparency and the data examples that you listed in your testimony, certainly what our belief or our approach is to report what you find. Even if it's below a particular EAL or an MCL, you find something to the ability that you're able to measure, you should report it. And that reporting should be consistent with your test methods as they improve over time. So for example, in our case, trichlorpropane, we've been monitoring it since the 1980s. Back in the 1980s, the minimum detectable was 200 parts per trillion. Today, we can measure down to 5. Whatever we see, we still report it and we still respond to it because it gives information about what you're seeing and you have something to compare to with what the standard is. So hopefully that answers your questions.
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anything else?
No, Meredith, I hope things are getting better for you. Thank you for, I know you're not in the islands anymore, but mahalo for your staying on top of this really important issue for our community and supporting our community.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate you all being there.
Okay, we're gonna clear out one more item for information. Number 3, financial disclosures, what you need to know. Chair turns it over to Eric Irwin from the Ethics Commission.
Good afternoon. This is Eric Irwin from the Honolulu Ethics Commission, and I'll be requesting to share my screen if that's okay.
Erica, is there somebody else from the Ethics Commission with you?
There is, and I will hand it over to her. Can you guys see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay, I'll hand it over to Terry.
Aloha mai kākou. My name's Terry Kili'ipuleole, and I'm an associate legal counsel with the Honolulu Ethics Commission. And as you already heard from Eric, he's also an associate legal counsel with the Honolulu Ethics Commission. So I'd like to thank you for putting us on the agenda today to just go for a brief presentation regarding financial disclosures. A large part of why we're here today is because we've made it our big kind of lofty goal for 2024 to reach 100% compliance for financial disclosure filings. Historically, we actually have proceeded to enforcement for delinquent board and commission filers. So in order to obtain this goal, we're just going to be actually popping up on as many board and commission agendas and calendars throughout the fall, gearing up for our upcoming financial disclosure due date and filing period. So with that being said, I'll just jump into the presentation. And so we wanted to keep it brief. So we'll start off with some just very quick FAQs, and then most importantly, our due dates, how to submit, and just kind of wrapping up our presentation, going over some potential penalties. Okay, and some main FAQs we often receive regarding financial disclosures from board and commission members specifically. The first one being, our board and commission members required to file. And yes, in short, board and commission members are considered city officers, and that city officership is what triggers the mandatory financial disclosure filings. And why are they important? It really assists with transparency, public trust in government, and it also assists the individual filers with identifying potential conflicts of interest to be able to avoid that throughout the course of your officership. If you have any specific questions about conflicts of interest, we're not here for that today, but we are available. We do, the big part of what we do is we give out free legal advice regarding ethics laws, conflicts of interest falling within that. So if you have questions about conflicts of interest, please feel free to reach out to us anytime with that. And then lastly, is my financial disclosure confidential? We often get that question from board and commission members. And yes, these are not public filings. This is the bread and butter of why we're here today. There's 3 important due dates to know for financial disclosures. The initial due date being 20 days from your swear-in date. The annual and ongoing is going to be every January 31st. You will have your annual financial disclosure due. The nuance with this one is that the filing period begins January 1st and closes January 31st because you're submitting for the previous calendar year. So unfortunately, so, if you're trying to get it in early and you try to submit in December of this year, 2023, that's going to count for the previous year. So we want to make sure you're filing for the correct year, getting the credit that you need. And that's the one that we're gearing up for, is this upcoming January 31st, 2024, and wanting to get that 100% compliance. So if you could please mark your calendars for that, we would truly appreciate it. And then the final due date for financial disclosure is going to be 10 days prior to leaving office. And how to submit. So our current process, it's not very sophisticated. It's that old paper submission where you print out, fill out the financial disclosure form and submit that to us. Our website is currently structured to try to be a little bit more user-friendly for city board and commission members, so that you could access the City Board and Commission Member tab on our website. It'll be on the left-hand side of our main home screen. And when you click on that, it's going to take you to just a page specific for City Board and Commission members. And at the very top of that will be the applicable financial disclosure form. You click on that link, print it out, fill it out, and then send that completed form to us, either by email or snail mail to our office. We understand that this can be a very tedious process. So we're hoping, and Eric will be able to share maybe some new exciting news and developments with regard to submitting financial disclosures. So with that, I will turn it over to Eric.
All right. So thank you, Terry. What Terry just shared is the way that is officially currently what's going to happen in 2024. And we say that with full knowledge that it is very likely to change. And so this hasn't been official yet, but the city is actually creating a new system that is going to replace that entirely. And so there won't even be an option to turn in a paper form or to mail a form in. You will actually be required to go to a new website, or well, actually an old website, but a new program within that website to file your financial disclosure electronically. And that will be accessed through hnl.info. That site is pre-existing. You can do some things. You can make some reservations in there, register for some city and county events. You can get some city and county information, but it will also be the destination for financial disclosure filing, not only for boards and commission, but also for city employees. Right now it is still in the making. It looks to go live on January 1st of next year. When we get a more solid answer, that final confirmation that this is going to happen, we will disseminate a guide, a step-by-step guide on how to go through this process with pictures, how to register, all that. And we're going to give that to your board liaisons and get that to you guys when this goes live. But right now, if you do want to get a head start on that, you can actually go to hnl.info and register, get a username, password, and you guys will be set for when this goes live, hopefully, very likely. But we do want to present on the older system just in case. But it's very much like a TurboTax system. I've been able to play with it. You just go through, it won't let you go to the next page unless you filled everything out. But just keep that in mind going forward. There will not be an option to mail or email anything. It will have to be done through this. The next part is penalties. So, I don't want to spend too much time on this because the main gist of this is that there are penalties that exist out there should you not file. And historically, like Terry said, the only people we have moved against have not been city employees. They've only been board and commission members. And we hate to do that because you guys are volunteering your time. This isn't, you guys are doing a great service for the community. We don't want to go after you. And so please keep in mind those deadlines, make sure you file. But, it starts out rather low, the initial fine after you get the notice of violation, which is essentially a complaint from in our process. If you don't file within 10 days, it's $100. Unless you've done it before, then it's $200. But once you fail to file for 30 days after that notice, the fines could climb up to $5,000. So please keep in mind they could get kind of steep. The criminal penalty is there. We've never enforced it ever, and it would have to be a pretty extreme example for us to even go that route. So it's on there as a possibility, but in all likelihood, it's going to be that top blue box. And with that said, I am going to circle back with this information and go back to something Terry said. But you know, we don't only with this financial disclosure system, if you guys have any questions throughout this process, or you guys are getting up to the deadline, please feel free to contact us. This is a free service. We don't charge for it. We don't do anything. We'll help walk you through that process or refer you to somebody who can help you. And your board liaison is also an excellent resource for this. But that phone number and email is also a great resource to what Terry said. If you guys have conflicts, if you guys have any ethics related questions, contact us. It's confidential. It's free. We've had board members contact us 2 hours before a meeting, say, hey, I have this conflict. Do I need to recuse myself? If you guys give us great information, tell us the timeline, the deadline you guys need it by, we'll get you a response 90% of the time by the time you need it. So we're a great resource. We're free. And like I said, if we're not the right place, we're not just going to send you away. We'll send you away to the right place. But at this point in time, unless there's anything else to add, Terry, we'll take questions. Terry?
No, nothing else to add.
Any questions, or are you guys good to go?
I
So
was
just for clarity.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. No,
Go
no,
ahead,
no.
Chair. Go ahead, Chair. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna make a joke. You go if you have a real question.
Oh. Just as long as none of us are going to jail, one quick question. So is this system going to be up and running by the next time this is due, or is it maybe going to be up and running?
So okay, I'll say this. So we can't officially say it's up and running, but it exists. It's in existence. They're ironing out the like the kinks. And as it stands right now, I know there's a very strong push to have this up and going by January 1st of next year. And so I can't officially say it's going, but it looks very likely to go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's probably like 85, 90% chance that it will go live January 1st.
Correct.
Thank you very much.
I was just gonna ask, how come you folks had the general email and contact info? I wanted to ask for Terry's contact info. But you can send that to me later, Ms.
Yes, I will.
Terry was my research assistant back in the day when she was in law school.
Yes,
like 20 years ago.
Yes, I was so very lucky to have Kapua.
But thank you so much.
All hard.
Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
To see you.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah,
thank you
so
for your
good
time,
seeing
guys.
you. And we tried to keep it brief,
Thanks,
so
everyone.
thank you so much. You know, I know you folks are so busy and doing such great things, so we really appreciate all of your hard work.
And just for clarity, there weren't any ethics violations in the first 2 hours of this meeting.
You guys are good.
I would have cleared you guys out first if I knew that was what he was doing over there. Okay, thanks you folks.
Okay.
Any other questions? Erwin, Ernie? Okay, thanks so much for your patience on this, and we'll see you next time. We're gonna re-rack this and go to the top of this meeting for items requiring board action. Starting with number 1, the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting held on September 25th, 2023. Can I get a motion?
So move.
Moved and seconded by John and Kapua. Any discussion? Hearing none. Motion passes. Do we need a roll call vote for this? Okay, roll call vote, please.
Thank you, Chair. Vice Chair Prospero.
Aye.
Board Member Jonathan Conchero.
Aye.
Board Member Ed Sniffen.
Aye.
Chair Nolly Anthony.
Aye.
Chair motion passes with 4 ayes.
Thank you. Please note that for the record. Moving on to item number 2, authorizing a public hearing to consider revisions to the schedule of rates and changes for the furnishing of water and water service for the fiscal years 2024 through 2029. Chair recognizes Dave Ebersold.
Our discussion today is around the potential authorization of a public hearing for changes to the schedule of water rates and charges. What I'd like to go through as we prepare for that discussion is to review the need for the update to existing water rates, then go through in detail what the updated water rate proposal consists of, review the public input activities conducted to date, and then take a look at the actual proposed notice of public hearing. So as we're all very well aware, especially in our island environment, all life does depend upon water, and the only water that we have is the water that's right here. We've been talking about that through various informational items earlier. And what the Board of Water Supply does in delivering that water from the underground system, the aquifer, to each of your homes and businesses requires this large and complex system that includes 13 tunnels, 5 shafts, 194 individual groundwater wells and source pumps. Some of that water requires treatment through 13 treatment facilities. From there, it goes into storage locations all around the island. It's then boosted to achieve the proper pressures to come out of your faucets. That involves transportation through 2,100 miles of pipe. There are 21,000 fire hydrants, and in total, this system serves 170,000 service connections, about 145 million gallons of water per day to a population of about 1 million people. So as has been discussed in the initial information item, the board is a semi-autonomous agency of the city and county of Honolulu, meaning that you as the board has the authority to set water rates and charges. And the board is funded solely by the money collected from its ratepayers through the provision of those services. The rates that we're talking about only apply to water. We're not talking about sewer charges today, just water charges. That's what the BWS is solely responsible for. There's been a lot of discussion about money, and right, this is what we're talking about. What do we use to spend this money on? So this is looking at the current operating fund budget for fiscal year 24. And if we start at the top of the pie chart, you see that blue slice, 13%. That's money that's used to fund the cash funded portion of the capital improvement program. Some projects, a portion of projects are paid for with cash, and a portion are paid for by borrowing money or selling bonds. But this is the cash funded capital portion. The purple slice is money that goes to pay off money that's been borrowed in the past. So it's called debt service. Together, that's about 27% of the budget. If we look at the orange slice, that's employee salaries, 19%. And if we add that to health and retirement benefits, that totals 29% of the budget. The next slice is gray. That goes to fund operations and maintenance. That's 31% of the budget. And then there's been some discussion, and we're going to talk more about it, about the big cost that electricity, the big expense that poses. This year, the board is expecting to pay about $36 million in electricity to pump that water out of the ground, move it all around the island, and pressurize it to get it into your homes and businesses. Total expenditures this current year, about $276 million. Well, rate increases happened, the last round of rate increases was for the period 2018 to 2023. And I think it's really important to reflect back on things that were accomplished with those rate increases. And in large part, this goes to fund the capital improvement program, which is repair and replacement of the existing infrastructure and expansion of the system where that's needed to accommodate growth. If we look at, in total, at projects in the planning, design, and construction phase, the money from those rate increases funded 494 different projects. A total of about $770 million has been invested in these improvements to the water system. This is really important. It goes to improve the reliability of the system, the dependability of the system, reduce main breaks, all those things that customers come to expect. In March of 2020, obviously a big global pandemic happened, and it affected all of us. And it affected all of us in different ways. And the Board of Water Supply was not immune from those impacts. It caused big changes in customers' water use patterns as businesses shut down around the island. Non-residential usage dropped. Residential usage increased greatly. And the trends in recovering from that are still underway. That event then set into motion a number of other ancillary events, not the least of which were global supply chain shortages, rampant inflation compared to what we were used to. This chart is showing the total inflation from 2019 to 2023. The green line at the top shows total inflation of just shy of 21%. In contrast, the Board of Supplies water rates went up 12.5% during that period. So that gap of about 7.5%, 8% represents a decrease in purchasing power and is one of the significant factors driving the rate increases that are necessary now. Power costs, let's talk about this slide a little bit. The purple line is the good news part of this story. This is the Board of Water Supplies power consumption in total kilowatt hours. If you look at the dashed purple line, you can see it's on a nice downward trend. So the BWS has been working hard to reduce its power consumption, and you can see it's accomplishing that. The green line in the middle, that's the energy cost factor. This is a charge that Hawaiian Electric imposes whenever energy costs vary. Energy costs, fuel costs have been going up. That energy cost adjustment factor has been going up. It's about tripled since July of 2020. And as a result, when you look at the orange line, that's the monthly cost for BWS power. That's gone up from about $2 million a month to over $3 million. Last year, total energy costs for the board were $33 million, or about 20% over what was anticipated. Previous conversations, there was a lot of talk earlier in the meeting about Red Hill and the impacts of that. Let's summarize, which is to say that there are multiple new monitoring wells and exploratory wells required to identify new sources of supply that are outside of the path of that contamination. The board is needing to replace about 17.5 million gallons per day of potable water supply. And as yet undetermined are the full impacts of this crisis to water quality, water supply, the impact to operations and maintenance costs, and the ultimate recovery of costs from the Navy. In response to that, the BWS has significantly tightened its belt. It has chosen to not pass on any of these energy cost increases to customers. It's deferred purchases of replacement vehicles and other equipment. There's been substantial deferral of less critical capital projects. And in the information item, you saw a slide that Ray Lynn showed that provided more detail on just how much the BWS has tightened the expenditures in its operations costs. The benefits to customers is that the board has been able to hold to already approved rate increases from that 2018 to 2023 period. And the commitment thus far in 2024 has been holding that operations and maintenance budget essentially flat, a 0.2% increase despite the ongoing high inflation. There was a lot of discussion about this balance that's necessary in rate setting earlier. I think the manager said it best. It's a delicate balance between providing a safe and dependable water supply while maintaining or striving to maintain rate affordability. Those two things work in tension with each other, and it's worthy of deep consideration, which the board has given it and which you continue to do as we move forward through this process. So what will these rate increases that are being proposed pay for? Let's focus in particular on the capital improvement program. And along the bottom are fiscal years 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, and 29. If we look at the large gold band in the middle of the chart, that represents sources, new sources of supply. And that's a very large part of what the proposed spending is for, a total of $399 million over this period of time. That's driven by monitoring and exploratory wells, which are part of the Red Hill response, the development of a new source, in fact, the BWS's first seawater desalination facility at Kaliloa, and in the later years, FY 28 and 29, the actual construction of replacement sources, again, part of the Red Hill response. Above that, there's a thin blue line, then a thin green line, and then a thin darker blue line. The first line represents security, control system, and facility improvements, a relatively consistent level of spending totaling $118 million through this period. You'll notice the green line has a big bump in the later years. That's for the construction of a new 8.5 million gallon reservoir. Pump renewal and replacement which is a critical part of being able to move water throughout the system, is budgeted at $119 million. And then the brown slice at the top, that's for new and replacement pipelines. Again, a large part of the effort to reduce the number of main breaks. That's been scaled back a lot from what was proposed in the Water Master Plan and Long Range Financial Plan as part of the cost control efforts. And in the current proposal, rather than it being 21 miles per year of replacement, what's being proposed is a total of about 41 miles of replacement over this 5.5-year period, a total investment of $425 million. In total, we're talking about $1.26 billion over 132 individual capital projects, all of which are very important and necessary to maintaining the dependability and reliability of the water system. Now, if we look at the BWS customers, they're divided into 5 different customer classes. The first being single-family residential. And single-family residential customers make up about 90% of the total customer accounts. They use 35.4% of the water. And what's notable here is the cost of service recovery. So what the board does is an analysis of how are the rates set to recover the cost to provide service to that customer class. Single-family residential customers pay 95% of the cost, not 100%, which means they're getting subsidized from other customer types. We'll talk about that in a second. Multi-unit residential customers, this makes up 4% of the customer accounts. They account for about 21% of the usage, and their cost of service recovery is 100%, meaning they pay what it costs to serve them. Agricultural customers, less than 1% of the customer base, use about 2.5% of the water. They pay about 60% of their full cost of service. This represents a very strong community value in supporting local agriculture, food sustainability, those types of community values. Non-residential customers make up about 5% of the customer base. This is the island's businesses, hotels, restaurants, government institutions, all of those types of things, large industrial customers. They use about 34% of the water, and they pay over their cost of service. In fact, they pay 117% of their cost of service. That money goes to offset the difference in single-family residential and also to provide below-cost rates for non-potable and recycled water customers, which is really important. The more non-potable and recycled usage there is, the more we can preserve that fresh, potable underground water for use in our homes, for drinking, for all those things that are so important to sustaining life. So the rates that are being proposed for this 5.5-year period, beginning on February 1st, 2024, and continuing through June 30th, 2029, unless otherwise superseded, would be 10% on February 1st, 2024, another 10% on July 1st, 2024, and then on each July 1st thereafter, 9%, 8.5%, 8%, and 8%. An important element in reviewing the customer classes was to be able to stress that all customer classes are going to have the same rate increase under this proposal. But the rates for some of the customers are tiered, in particular the residential customers, and I'm going to explain what that means in a bit. So the changes may vary by tier, but they are consistent across all the customer classes. Let's explain what that means. So here we're looking at the tiered, on the top, we're looking at the tiered rate structure for single-family residential customers. And on the bottom, that's the tiered rate structure for multifamily residential. I'm going to go through the one on the top in detail. The first tier, 0 to 2,000 gallons of usage per month, that's called the essential needs tier. The current rate for that water is $4.46 per 1,000 gallons. The next tier is from 2,000 to 6,000 gallons. That's charged at $5.25 per 1,000 gallons. The next tier, the third tier, is from 6,000 gallons to 30,000 gallons. That's $5.85 per 1,000. And then the highest tier, where only 3% of BWS's single-family residential customers are using water in this tier, but it's a lot of water, and that's charged the highest rate, $9.25 per 1,000 gallons. For reference, 6,000 gallons per month, that's what we call the median usage. So half of BWS's customers use less than 6,000 gallons per month, and half of them use more. The tier structure is very similar for multifamily residential, but the tiers are set a little bit lower, reflecting the fact that multifamily residential doesn't have the same amount of outdoor irrigation as single-family residential. So what's being proposed is to limit the increase in the essential needs tier to 2.5% per year. Now, this is already a below-cost rate for the first 2,000 gallons of usage per month. All residential customers get this rate regardless of how much water they eventually use, but the first 2,000 gallons is at this below cost rate. And in fact, 10% of BWS's residential customers use 2,000 gallons a month or less. That 2.5% increase, it's what's shown over in this tier 1 number here. Again, 0 to 2,000 gallons, tier 1. The current charge is $4.46 per 1,000 gallons. And on July 1st, 2028, that new amount would be $5.17 per 1,000. What's being done here is to shift the burden to the highest water users. And let me direct your attention to the far right-hand side of the slide. That's tier 4 water usage. Again, the top 3% of users fall into this tier. That rate is currently $9.25 per 1,000 gallons. That's proposed to go up to $18.02 per 1,000 gallons by July 1st, 2028. Again, reinforcing the issue of the more you use, the more you pay, and really emphasizing the idea that conservation is important and you can control your bill by controlling how much water you use. So digging into detail, this is what the detailed rate schedule would look like for each of the 4 tiers. Looking down the first column, essential needs, tiers 2, 3, and 4. The actual gallons per month of usage are shown in the next column. The current rates are shown in the lavender column, and the proposed changes to those rates are shown in the blue columns. This is just a different way of depicting the information I showed on the previous slide and in a bit more detail. It's important to think about how to calculate your water bill, and I'm going to go over what that looks like. I want to stress that this information is presented on every customer's water bill each month. You can look on your bill and see this calculation. This is an example for a customer using 8,510 gallons per month. It's a single-family residential customer on a 3/4 inch meter, which is the smallest meter size. Most residential customers are 5/8 or 3/4 inch meters. So the first thing that's done is to round down the usage amount to the nearest 1,000 gallons, or 8 kgals. Then we look at how much usage occurs in each tier. So tier 1 is the first 2,000 gallons. So there's the 2,000 gallons. That's multiplied times $4.46 per 1,000 for a total amount of $8.92. This customer is also fully utilizing the tier 2 allotment. So there's 4,000 gallons in tier 2 multiplied times $5.25. The total amount for that usage in tier 2 is $21. There's 2,000 gallons of usage in tier 3. That equals $11.70. There's no usage in tier 4. And then the monthly customer charge of $12.09 is added to that. And that equals $53.71. That's for the water bill. I mentioned the monthly customer charge. That's going to go up in the same percentage increases that I showed previously. As I mentioned, residential customers, almost all residential customers have 5/8 or 3/4 inch meters. They pay the lowest amount. That's currently $12.09 per month. That would go up at the end of the period to $20.18 per month. These charges are based on the actual costs incurred to service these customers and repair and maintain the meters. The larger the meter, the more that costs to repair and maintain, which is why you see these costs increasing as meter size goes up, and all the details are shown in the chart here. So let's compare some water bills. This is an example bill for a low water user, someone using 2,000 gallons per month. They currently pay $21.01 for that water. That would go up on February 1st, 2024, under these proposed changes by less than $1 to $22.44. The following, on July 1st of 2024, it would go up about $1.60 more to $24. Those increases would continue on each July 1st thereafter, ending up at $30.52 on July 1st, 2028. The increases in each year are shown, as are the percentage changes each year. Now, I really want to point out these percentage changes. Remember, I said each customer class is going to see the same percentage change. And in the first year, that would be 10%. You look here and you say, well, that's less than 10%. Again, that's because we're keeping the increases in the essential needs tier way down, and that's reflected in the lower increase in the low water use customers' bill amount. If we look at the average water user, this is someone using 9,000 gallons of water per month. They currently pay $59.56. And on February 1st of 2024, that would go up to $65.12. Now let's reflect a little bit on what is an average water user. This covers about 2/3 of BWS's single-family residential customers. More than 60% of customers use 9,000 gallons a month or less. So that bill would go up by $5.56 per month on February 1st. And then you can see the increases on the start of each of the subsequent fiscal years. And on July 1st, 2028, it would be $97.80. I want to direct your attention to those percentage changes. Look at the first year. Again, it's below the 10% number for the customer class as a whole. And that's because every customer gets the benefit of that lower cost essential needs tier, regardless of how much water they use. Let's look at the high water user. Here's an example for someone using 35,000 gallons of water per month. Let's be honest, that's a lot of water. About 3% of BWS's customers are using more than 30,000 gallons a month. The current bill for this customer is nearly $230 a month. That would go up to $257 on February 1st of 2024. The increases in each of the subsequent years are shown. July 1st of 2028, it would be $413.49. Look at the percentage change in the first year. That's 12.4%. That's higher than the 10% for the customer class as a whole. Again, that's reflecting the very purposeful input from stakeholders, from the permitted action group, from input along the way, that let's shift the burden to the highest water users as much as we can. Multi-unit residential customers, here's their rate structure. The tiers are shown in the first column, the tier amounts in the second column. The current charge is in the lavender column, and the proposed changes are in the blue cells. So current rate in tier 1, $3.77 per thousand, would go up to $4.37 per thousand gallons on July 1st, 2028. The increases are higher in the higher usage tiers, similar to what's in single-family residential. Let's look at some sample bills. The first row, this is a multi-unit complex, 272 dwelling units, a 3-inch meter, and the average usage per dwelling unit, which is determined by looking at the total usage for the complex and dividing by the number of dwelling units. That's 7,000 gallons per month. The total bill for that complex, including all the usage charges and the meter charge, is $8,619. On February 1st, 2024, that would go up to a little bit below $9,500. You can see the increases in each of the subsequent years in this bill. Let's compare that to the line at the bottom, because this is a complex with nearly the same number of dwelling units, but they have a larger meter and they don't use water as efficiently. Their average usage per dwelling unit is 14,000 gallons per month. So they're paying a higher meter charge and higher usage charges. They currently pay almost $20,000 a month for that. That would go up to $22,610 on February 1st, 2024. And by July 1st, 2028, that would equal $37,413. Non-residential customers pay the same rate per 1,000 gallons regardless of how much water they use. These are the drivers of the island's economy. These are businesses, these are hotels, these are government agencies, these are industrial customers, and they all use water very differently from each other. It's important to note that because a given business uses a lot of water does not mean that it's using water inefficiently. And it's a very difficult thing to get a handle on the nuances of each individual customer and in order to be able to establish a tiered rate that's fair and equitable. So what many water agencies, including the BWS, do is charge a uniform rate regardless of the amount of usage. So that would go up by 10% on February 1st, 2024, then 10% on July 1st, and then the same increases for all the customer classes is what you see here. The cost per thousand would go from a current amount of $5.27 to $8.80 on July 1st, 2028. Let's take a look at some sample bills. If we look at the top row, this is an example of, say, a fast food restaurant, maybe a McDonald's or something like that, served by an 1.5 meter using about 230,000 gallons of water a month. They currently pay $1,230 for that. That would go up to $1,352 on February 1st, 2024. You can follow the row out and see all the increases each year thereafter. If we go down a few rows, let's say, let's go to the second row, a hotel, a 6-inch water meter using a little over 1.5 million gallons of water a month. They currently pay over $8,000 for that usage. That would go up to $13,726 on July 1st, 2028. Go to the bottom. This is a large shopping center on a 3-inch meter using nearly 5 million gallons of water per month. They currently pay just shy of $26,000 per month for that. Through this period of increases, that would go up to about $43,200. The current reduced rates for local agriculture and recycled water customers would be continued. The rates would go up in the same percentages as we've been talking about, but again, they don't pay their full cost of service. It's a discounted rate relative to that full cost of service. So for the agricultural customer, their first 2 tiers of usage are currently exactly the same as a single-family residential customer. That third tier is all usage above 6,000 gallons per month. That's at a discounted rate, knowing that that's used for irrigation of crops, production of sustainable food supplies. And so that's reflecting that community value of lower costs for agricultural customers. Here's the details behind the rate. The first tier is charged at $4.46 per thousand. It would go up to $5.17 per thousand gallons by July 1st, 2028. The big difference here is in the second tier is just like in single family residential. The third tier is currently $2.12 per thousand gallons. That would go up to $3.56 per thousand gallons at the end of this period. As an example bill, this is a customer on a 1-inch meter using 98,000 gallons of water per month. They currently pay $240.20. That would go up to just under $400 by July 1st, 2028. You can see the percent changes there and the cumulative change of $158 per month. Non-potable and recycled water rates, this shows the details for each of those. Again, they increase at those same percentages as all the other customer classes, and the details behind it in terms of charges per 1,000 gallons are shown in this table. There are in place existing fee waivers. These are waivers of the water system facilities charge and the meter charge for affordable housing and for homeless housing units. There's also a waiver of the meter charge to retrofit fire sprinklers. The proposed rates includes an extension of these existing fee waivers. This is all the fine print as it appears in the proposed schedule of rates and charges. Suffice it to say that it's a continuation of everything that is currently in place. The BWS is also considering waivers of the water system facilities charge and the meter charge for new small farmers, those connecting to the system for the very first time with either a 3/4 inch or a 1-inch meter. They would need to provide proof that they're a viable agricultural business. They would need to maintain in business for at least 5 years. They would need to submit a water use plan upfront to demonstrate that they'll use water efficiently. But this is really intended to provide support for those new small farmers trying to get into business, and again, furtherance of the strong community value for supportive agriculture. There is a fire meter standby charge. Very few customers pay this charge. It's specifically for readiness to serve, and it applies only to those customers who have a private fire protection system, including automatic fire sprinklers that are connected to alarms, fire hydrants, and wet standpipes. It's currently $7.99 per month for 2-inch and smaller meters. That would go up to $13.34 by July 1st, 2028. And down at the bottom, you can see how that charge varies by meter size. And the 8-inch customer 8-inch meter is $52.94. And that would increase gradually to $88.36. Again, this is a charge that affects relatively few customers. There are no changes proposed for emergency interconnections. These are charges for emergency or temporary service outages on the private water system if in the event that they need to connect to BWS's system. This is contingent upon manager's approval and demonstration that it doesn't impact existing customers' level of service. Similarly, there's no changes being proposed to the water system facilities charge. This is a one-time charge that applies to new development or those connecting to the system for the very first time. Again, affects very few people, only the first time they connect to the system, and no changes are being proposed. The BWS does have a couple of cost adjustment factors within the schedule of rates and charges. The first is with respect to power costs. If power costs go up more than what was anticipated in the establishment of those rates, then the BWS can automatically increase its water rates by a penny per 1,000 gallons for each $500,000 that those power costs exceed what was anticipated. There's a similar fee for environmental regulations compliance. Again, no changes are being proposed to these charges. We've talked a lot about the fact that the design of the water rates and the design of the changes to the water rates are really tailored to help encourage water conservation. And so towards that end, the BWS has an extensive water conservation program. There are a number of abilities or opportunities to get rebates on water conservation devices for both residential and commercial customers. You can go to the BWS's website for more information about that. And BWS is aggressively pursuing and actually already implementing expansion to these water conservation programs, including outreach to top water users, including hotels and other businesses, condos, townhomes, looking at a direct install program for Kupuna living on their own that includes things like free low flow shower heads, water audits of homes, and ensuring that these customers are getting the appropriate rebates that they're entitled to. Talking about then the public information that's been out there about this and the extensive efforts that the Board of Water Supply has gone to publicize these proposed changes and get public input on them. There were 4 community information meetings that were held. Those were in Kaneohe, Honolulu, Kapolei, and Mililani. The dates and times of those meetings are shown here. In total, there was about 25 in-person attendees, not a lot different than the number of attendees when this was done 5 years ago with the previous rate increase. But what's more important is the different venues that these meetings can be viewed on demand. These videos were taken of all 4 of these meetings. They're each available on the BWS's website. There have been 92 views of those. All 4 of the meetings aired on Olelo at least 4 times each throughout September, and all 4 meetings are also available on Olelo Video on Demand. There were a number of ways and continue to be a number of ways for the public to provide input and comment on these proposed rates. That can be by mail, through email, by contacting the BWS. Customers have been able to scan this QR code in the upper right-hand corner. This says that input will be taken through October 15th. In fact, input will be taken all the way through the completion of a public hearing if your board chooses to authorize that. There have been 21 neighborhood board presentations attended by about 420 people. Each of those are shown here. I believe there's 2 more neighborhood board presentations later this week, and they're continuing to any remaining neighborhood boards that wish to have a presentation going forward. There have been 7 interest groups that have had presentations, about 150 attendees. These include your stakeholder advisory group, your commercial stakeholder advisory group, Chamber of Commerce Hawaii Government Relations, House District 44, Kukui Plaza, Green Business Conference, and the city's Stormwater Stakeholder Advisory Group. There's a special edition of Water Matters that was mailed to all 170,000 account holders, providing the details of the proposed changes and the reasoning behind them. There have been 7 city council member briefings in addition to a briefing with the managing director on July 25th. On the BWS website, there is extensive information about these proposed changes. There have been over 1,759 views of that, 745 of those being unique users. These numbers continue to rise as time goes on. There's been quite a bit amount of media coverage. It's summarized here. An important element of the rate review process is the requirement to present the proposed changes. This is a state requirement to present these proposed changes to the Small Business Regulatory Review Board. The BWS prepared a small business impact statement and submitted it for the SBRRB's review. There was then an in-person meeting on August 17th of 2023. At the end of that meeting, after a number of follow-up questions, the Small Business Regulatory Review Board made a unanimous recommendation to proceed to public hearing on these proposed rate changes. There's some follow-up actions that are noted at the bottom of the slide that'll be required after the public hearing in order for the rates to ultimately be effective. I mentioned the stakeholder advisory group meetings. Actually, the BWS's stakeholder advisory group was formed in May of 2015. That's when they held their first meeting, and an update as of last week, there have now been 48 stakeholder advisory group meetings, and this group has really dug into the details of the development of this set of proposed rate changes. Their input has been seriously considered and has been presented to your board in previous board updates. At the meeting last week, they strongly supported proceeding to with the authorization of a public hearing. Absolutely no opposition to taking that action expressed by that group. There was also at the end of last week a meeting of your commercial stakeholder advisory group, and again, no stated opposition to proceeding to public hearing. So where we are in this overall process, it started back in January of 2022 with a series of detailed technical evaluations, evaluations of different alternatives and the impacts of those alternatives on customers, on affordability. There have been literally dozens and dozens of different permutations that have been looked at in an effort to keep increases as low as possible and still maintain the necessary improvements and investments in infrastructure to maintain the supply reliability. So now, as we're going through the process of seeking public input and then formally going to your board for consideration, we're in that October, November timeframe down at the bottom. What you're being asked to authorize is a proposed notice of public hearing. If you look at the far left-hand side of this slide, that's the notice in its totality. I realize it's nearly invisible to read, so let's break it into 3 parts. There's some text up at the top part that's blown up on this slide. That's the details on the notice of the public hearing, when it would be held, how people can go get information about it. The middle part where all those graphs are, that's on the next slide. And those are the actual schedules of rates and charges, all of which I just went through with you in detail on the PowerPoint slide, showing how the rates would change in each tier and how each of the charges would change. Finally, there's the small print at the bottom talking about the standby charge, the power cost adjustment, the waiver of the water system facilities charge for homeless and affordable housing, the waiver of the water system facilities charge for new farmers. All of those things are detailed here. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Members, any questions? Vice Chair Sprout.
I have a question. Aloha, Dave. Mahalo for all of your hard work and your aloha. I take very seriously the managing director's concerns about those who are already on the margins of society. But my takeaway from the info that's been shared today, both by you as well as by our chief engineer and by Ray, is that, you know, we've already tightened our collective belt. We've done our very best to shave costs, and power and other costs continue to rise. I also noted Ray's slide, which raised concerns about insolvency if we don't raise rates at some point, let alone impacts to our stellar bond rating. So given all of that, how would you respond to the managing director's ask about delaying our price increases at least slightly to account for the end of the direct assistance payments? You're a numbers guy, so is it possible and or advisable?
Yeah, great question. Ray actually showed a couple of alternatives that looked at deferral of those increases. The first one of those alternatives was foregoing the increase on February 1st, 2024 and forestalling it until July 1st of 2024. The reality of that is it does a couple of things. It would first force you to make cuts to your current budget of several $million dollars. And then it would cause an additional set of cuts to what's proposed for capital expenditures and your operating expenses in the next fiscal year, because you would lack that base that you're building upon. One of the things we looked at is if you did that and you wanted to get back on track, say in fiscal year 2026, what would you need to do in terms of a rate increase at that time to get back on track? I don't have that slide in front of me, but my recollection of that number is that at that point, you'd need to institute about over a 19% rate increase to get you back on this course. That certainly, I think, classifies as what we in the industry would call rate shock, which also isn't advisable for customers. So that's the balance that we strike. Just shifting the delay from January 1st, 2024 to February 1st, 2024 has resulted in a decrease in days working capital by several days. The need to make adjustments of a few $1 million in this year's budget, but that is a necessary shift in order to allow the IT systems time to implement these proposed changes. So I would say pretty unavoidable given the potential downside to that. I guess in short, in my opinion, to maintain the guidelines that this board has set, which is to not have rate increases that exceed 10% at any moment, and to never drop below 45 days working capital, there really isn't a lot of flexibility here to maintain those guidelines.
Thank you. That's very helpful for me. Mahalo.
John, just a couple questions, Dave.
Yes, sir.
So I saw the slide go by about the power cost fee. We've been in meetings with Ray and Ernie, and you know and also the slide is the slide that you shared early on in this presentation, talking about how there were unanticipated power costs over the last couple of years that were, I think, $5.5 million outside of what had been budgeted, or 20% of the cost of power. Granted, you don't have a crystal ball, you can't see into the future. in your opinion, is the 1% per, whatever the rating is that enough? Like, do we need to tinker with that as a tool to make an adjustment, or are we okay with where it stands?
Yeah, great question. So the way that cost adjustment is structured is that for each $500,000 that your costs would go over what was anticipated, it's a penny increase in the rate. And if we apply that penny increase across the entire rate base, it generates about $500,000. So it's a 1-for-1 offset. And since it's tied to each $500,000 increment, I believe it's adequate to cover the changes in that cost.
Thank you. Just another thing that I mean, there's a lot of data for the ratepayers to kind of take on. I mean, I'm sure they're going back to their bills and looking at, okay, what category do I fall into, and what does that mean for me? You know, shuttling forward to try to understand. I took the large stack of emails that came in over the last couple of weeks, and I didn't get through all of them, but I got through like maybe about 9/10 of them. I just had a little bit left, and I had to come into the meeting to prep. And by and large, there are you know, there are these topics that pop up that people are concerned about. Certainly, folks who are on fixed income, they're older. I think there is a lot of confusion as to what the sewer fee does versus what the BWS water service fee does. Yeah. So that gets kind of commingled. And I guess what I would ask is like, can you confirm in general that the lower water users, right? So, and also if I read this policy correctly, you take the water bill, they cap it 2,000 gallons a month. If they're rounding down, you could actually go to 2,900 gallons and it still rounds down to 2. Is that how that works?
It catches up with you the following month.
Then they add the 900 gallons to the next month?
Well,
Or?
they use water and they go over 900 gallons, so they end up.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's, okay.
So it kind of fluctuates back and forth.
So in general, the lower water users aren't necessarily covering their cost of service. And in general, the much higher water users have to pay more than the cost of service because they are using more water, and we are trying to ask people to use less water in all of the different case statements that persist.
I don't even think you need to say in general.
Yeah.
Your lowest water users are paying well below the cost to serve them.
Mhm.
That burden is being shifted to the highest water users. I can't say whether that takes them to full 100% cost of service recovery. Don't know the answer to that.
Sure.
But they're certainly paying, the lower water users are certainly paying well below their cost of service.
Okay. So then last question, and maybe this is a question for Ernie because it's the internal kind of part of this, but okay, so we take these notice of public hearing and we send them out. And so the next meeting, which is more than 30 days from now, the November meeting, we're on public hearing, people are gonna come, all 100 of my friends who emailed in are gonna come in and they're gonna talk about this, and they're gonna share. Is what you are proposing here in this structure over the course of 42 slides or whatever it is that set in stone, or are we to take up any thought of making adjustments, like to your point about if there is a shift in for instance, in timing, if this went to March or April? What it sounds to me is like what you're talking about is that if we shift any further back, then we're gonna see these larger spikes somewhere in the middle of the end to make us whole by 2028 or 9 or whatever it is.
Yes.
Is there a possibility for adjustment after we vote on this today? Or are we voting on this is what we're gonna do?
Today is to simply, the actions asked of the board is to authorize holding a public hearing on this rate proposal as described today. And it is a proposal, so the board actually adopts it. So after the public hearing, the board can decide to proceed to adopt in the regular meeting the rates as proposed in the public hearing notice.
At the next meeting, we can do that.
At the next meeting, after the public hearing closes. Or the board could say, no, let's try delaying this rate increase or modifying this component. then the board, at that point, we would need time to evaluate the financial impact of those changes.
Right.
And have to come back to the board probably the subsequent month. So I'm looking at maybe, right now, the proposal, the request here before the board is to authorize a public hearing in November, next board meeting. If the board says, no, today, let's try to look at changes, or if the board says in December, after the public hearing is held, to want to revise the proposal, then we would need time to evaluate and present back to the board the change proposal and what the impacts are to operations, the CIP and the operating budget. And maybe at that time, request the board to authorize a public hearing at a month later.
To do it again.
Yeah, to kind of go through this process again. So and Dave, jump in if my math is off here, but I'm thinking that the earliest that the board could potentially adopt a revised proposal might be in January of next year, in the future. Dave,
So that surely pushes back the February start.
Oh, yeah, definitely the February start is then off the table. Then are we looking at, as the managing director alluded to, potentially their request might be no rate increases in 2024. We'd have to really come back to the board and show the board what the impact is. And I think we attempted to do that today in the earlier discussion of the permitted interaction group, the consequences. So they get to be pretty severe. And really a changing or not having the increases really is just, it doesn't go away. The need doesn't go away. It gets pushed into the future.
And it starts to compound.
Well, it gets larger to catch up.
Yeah.
Dave, if you agree or disagree?
No, I agree with the general timeline that you laid out. As I was thinking about the idea of, if you, for example, were to not implement the first 10% increase and wait until July 1st and implement a 10% increase then, what does that mean? It's not as simple as just foregoing 10% increase, because that actually, if you apply the cumulative math, by the end of the period, that is actually a nearly 16% decrease in the amount of money that you're collecting from customers by the end of that period. So it really does have a dramatic effect, not so much in the first year, although it's not great in the first year, but by the end of the rate setting period, it really becomes much more dramatic.
This is what they don't teach in high school, called the time value of money.
And compounded interest.
Right.
Yep.
The other aspects to.
I'm
sorry, maybe.
Vice Chair.
No, it's okay. I'm happy to let Ernie finish and then chime in after.
Well, I think there's another factor to consider, because and it is how we're set up, is that the board adopts annual operating budgets and annual capital improvement program, CIP budget. The board does adopt a multi-year plan, and we each year the board has to adopt the next year's budget to implement that plan. So we run into challenges looking at what is the operating and CIP budget for FY25 going to look like. Right. And around March or April, we actually have starting in earnest those discussions, and then I think in May we hold a budget workshop. So I just want to remind the board, FY23 to fiscal year 23, which has already passed, we're in fiscal year 24, we adopted virtually a flat operating budget, understanding that there is no rate increases in effect. If we think that rate increases might take effect in FY25 or FY26 as the first rate increase, then our operating budget for 3 consecutive years would have to be flat. So what's going to happen is we've already cut our operating expenses by quite a bit. We have nearly 200 vacancies right now. And it's going to be our capital improvement program budget will shrink drastically to be able to operate within the funding that we have. So we're kind of at this crossroads right now. And And unfortunately, the timing for both is very close and overlapping.
Yeah.
So our decisions on Ray, Ray is gonna have a heck of a time trying to develop and propose FY25 budget that is virtually also flat while we're facing increased costs to operate.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, Ernie, I'm gonna interrupt you now.
yeah, go ahead.
I didn't earlier. So I mean, hearing all of that, I'm not suggesting that we kick the can down the road, because to me, that's really what this looks like. I mean, it's kicking the can down the road. Either we do 10% now or we do 16% for them next year. And to me, especially if we're looking at people on the margins of society, and given the slides that Dave shared, looking at what the increases are, especially for the lower two tiers, you know, they are increases, but it's, to me, seems more manageable at a smaller rate spaced over time than basically having to do rate shock and raising things at a 19% rate. So I think we've all very seriously considered the ask that the managing director asked us to look at, but you know, he didn't have the information. He admitted himself that they don't have the numbers. And that's why I asked this question of Dave, because he is our guy with the numbers. So given that information, I feel comfortable moving forward with the timetable that we have. I can't speak for the other board members, but Ernie, before you explain more and things, I just wanted to let you know I wasn't, you know, I'm satisfied with Dave's answer. I mean, unfortunately, I wish there were other ways that we could do this, but I think we have already done a tremendous amount as far as reducing costs, trying to space things out, being particularly mindful of the impacts we're having on Kupuna and other folks.
Yeah, it is thank you, board member Spro. Like I said earlier, it's a struggle to achieve the right balance for our community, and yet still be able to provide this critical service important for everyone. But Dave, you want to add anything? Did I misspeak on anything?
No, unless there's any other questions, I don't have anything to add.
May I add something? Sure. Just for facts for the board, when we were deliberating in the committee, I think one of the big metrics, or the main metrics we were basing off, you know, selecting the rates with the working capital minimum days. So it's you know, it's not a highly visible number, but it's definitely a number that you want to maintain throughout your budget and the timeline. So I think we agreed that there would be a floor of 30 days from 60. And then sometimes we slowly gradually go from, I would say, 40 to 60 over the span of a year or two. But with the lower rate increase, intuitively it took longer, and we dipped below 30, I believe.
45.
45,
yeah.
Which, you know, if something really bad were to happen to the, you know, our municipality, then we'd have to take that risk, that exposure. So I just want to put that out there for the board to consider. That was a major factor in selecting the rates as is today, you know, going through this study. And also just another detail that kind of enlightened me was this January 1st, or, you know, beginning of year rate increase is actually considered, you can consider a rate deferral from July of this year, right? So it's we're kind of already pushing pushing it a little bit. So I'm not advocating either way for the board, but just want to put those facts out as I see it.
Yeah. Something else if I could add, Chair, is that the working capital fund is really there. Imagine a major disaster hitting our island and devastation across, you know, many parts of the island, where even if we wanted to bill people would still not even have homes to return to, not have the ability to pay the bill. So under those circumstances, you know, we probably have to suspend billing for a season until the island's recovered enough from a major disaster. During that time, we still have to pay for the operation of the water system and recovery of the water system. And that's where the working capital, the number of days in that fund, it's kind of this bridge toward an island and a system that has recovered from a major disaster. So like Ray pointed out in her presentation, it's kind of balanced. This is a risk management, a risk balancing approach. How small working capital fund do we want to risk? And yet we know every year we're going to be into hurricane season from June to November.
And Ernie, I do want to point out too, that over time, we have already reduced that to 45 days. That is already a compromise. And looking at, you know, the budget and what we used to do before and kind of restructure the budget and making sure that we're, you know, doing the best we can by our customers, we've reduced that to 45. We considered 60, we considered other numbers. And, you know, given, and I don't mention this lightly, but given what Maui has just experienced in Lahaina, we know that with our new climate reality, anything can happen. And so we've been so fortunate on Oahu that we have not experienced a major disaster recently, but we need to be ready if something happens. So thank you, Jonathan, for pointing that out. That's very important.
Chair, if I might. The working capital fund, the guideline that came out of the permitted interaction group was 45 days. Your stakeholder advisory group has voiced a very strong opinion that they don't think it should ever drop below 60 days. I might add that over the past 3 years, your working capital has done exactly what it should do. You've been spending it down, and it's allowed you the opportunity to respond to a global pandemic, to respond to rampant inflation, and to respond to rapidly increasing energy prices, which is exactly the types of functions that it's designed to do. So it's working.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that sentiment. I think that's an important piece of the puzzle here, that it does actually work. Any other comments?
One more comment. Sure.
Yeah.
So there's different levers you can pull, right? Time and rate percentages, and then the tier structure. So one of the questions I had, a couple months ago was how much can we tier the rates such that we can further subsidize the lower tier, right? And maybe pass the cost on to the higher tier. And that's a balancing act as well. But as Kathleen pointed out, and the Board of Water team is also multifamily, multi-generational housing that use a lot of water in one household, right? So they have to pay their water bill even if it's very high. So we can't, even though the very high water users might be able to pay, most of them, there's also the multi-generational housing that we still have to consider. So that's, I'm just putting that out there for the board to, take in as facts.
If I could take a stab at that and Dave jump in. So we have 4 tiers, like for example, the single family residential tiered structure. The first 3 tiers are are proposed to be kind of moderate increases. And the 3rd tier actually goes from 6,000 to 30,000 gallons. And it's there, you wonder why is it so large? The first tier is 0 to 2,000 gallons. Then from 2,000 to 4,000.
2 to 6.
2 to 6. And then from 6 to 30,000. And then it's the 4th tier when you go above 30,000 where the increases proposed are like really steep, really high. And the reason we kept the 3rd tier such a wide tier or a broad tier from 6 to 30,000 was the very reason the multi-generational homes, whether a lot of people in their water use gets up to like 30,000, 29,000 gallons a month, that we keep those rate increases relatively moderate.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? I know we have one piece of testimony here. He's been very patient and in person. So I'm gonna open this to David Pepper.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'll just ask 4 questions and then the answers can come in at a later time since this meeting's running long. The first question, a big portion of the budget goes towards capital expenditures. And we know that with the Red Hill situation, replacement water sources is a key component of our budget now. We also heard earlier today that federal grants can be something that can help with operating expenses. As part of the remediation plan for the Red Hill situation is our grants or federal funding, part of that to provide replacement water resources, not just taking care of the environmental problem and trying to protect the existing water resources, but to also fund basically the backfilling or the replacement of the water sources that have been lost. So that's question number one. Question number two, I appreciate the Board of Water Supply and the Board of Directors concern for individual ratepayers. One group that I think that is missed in that consideration is people that don't actually see their water bill. So we know that if there's only 170,000 plus accounts and there's only over 1 million users of water, that there are a lot of people that don't see individual water bills. So they really, in essence, don't have direct control and at most have limited control over their water usage or their water bill per se. They can control their own water usage, but when it's a community bill, they can't really affect that dramatically. So also too, communications that go out to individual ratepayers are probably not even seen by a large portion of the community because they don't see their bill. So my question to the board is, what percentage of people really don't actually ever see their water bill? That's question number two. Question number three, I come from a community that would probably be classified as high water users. And I'm interested in the outreach program. I'm wondering if we can volunteer for this program to see if there are creative ways that we can reduce water usage. And I think that goes far beyond the typical ones that we've seen. Rain barrels and toilet controls and things like that aren't going to really move the needle in our case. But I would like to open up dialogue and be part of one of those outreach groups. So I just need information about how I can volunteer for that, my community. And the last one is, I think I have a general idea how customer classes are established, but I do think there's a great deal of unfairness in the single family residential unit rate class, because some single family residential unit homes have water basically delivered and metered at their doorstep, while others have it delivered to the city street, and then they're responsible for a multi-million-dollar water delivery system within their unit, or within their community, excuse me, but they're paying the same rates. So it's a completely different class of service and cost of service, though it's the same rates charged. So my question is, in the establishment of the class that your residence falls in, how that's done and how it can be changed, or maybe we receive an exemption or a modification of that. So those are my 4 questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, David. In the interest of time, I'm going to hold those 4 questions for answer via the electronic submission for later. Is that okay?
Yeah, no, we'd be glad to get back to Mr. Tupper and thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, and Mr. Tupper, your specific situation has come up in the past, so we'd love to talk with you, especially about number 3, with respect to creative ways to reduce water use. I know that that's probably been a topic of your area's meetings internally for some time now.
Well, thank you so much. And hopefully I can get my 2 minutes at the end. That was hopefully my 1 minute. I did it in reverse, but I have a little bit more in detail to share about that when we get to the last item on the agenda.
Water main report?
Yes,
Great.
thank you.
Yep.
Thank you so
I'm
much.
down for that.
Appreciate it.
Okay. Okay, any other discussion? So just to recap, this is an item requiring board action authorizing a public hearing to consider revisions to the schedule of rates and charges, furnishing of water and water service for the fiscal years 2024 through 2029. May I have a motion? So moved. Moved by Jonathan.
Second.
Beat her, you beat him by the half second there, Vice Chair Kapua. It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay. Madam Secretary, roll call vote, please.
Thank you, Chair. Vice Chair Kaput Pro,
Aye.
Board Member Jonathan Kanashiro,
Aye.
Board Member Edwin Stippens,
Aye.
Chair Nalek Anthony.
Aye.
Chair, motion passes with 4 ayes.
We're gonna move on for items for information. I believe we're going on to number 4, recruitment status. Michelle Thomas is recognized by the chair.
Good evening, Board Chair and Board members. Michelle Thomas, the Chief Human Resources Officer for the Board of Water Supply. I'm going to be providing you with an update regarding our recruitment efforts for the first quarter of fiscal year 2024. For the period of July 2023 to September 2023, we had 10 new hires, 2 promotions, 2 transfers, and 18 separations. In this quarter, just like we have had in the past, we've had quite a bit of activity. We currently have about 113 positions that are in active recruitment right now. We've also been, trying to get as much visibility out there in the community regarding the opportunities that we have available at the board. Most recently in October, we participated in the Hawaii Career Expo that was at Neil Blaisdell Center, and also in the UH Engineering Job Fair that was recently done. And in November, the manager is actually going to be participating in the Hawaii Chamber of Commerce Job Fair that they're going to be putting on in a few weeks. Also, in addition to those efforts, I actually was recently appointed to the State Apprenticeship Committee. They're going to be having an apprenticeship week with a bunch of virtual activities in November that they've asked for us to participate in. So we'll be doing that as well. And we're also working with the city DHR because they are going to be doing videos for recruitment purposes, and our own very valuable Stephen Nordstrom is going to be featured in those recruitment videos. So you'll be seeing him on various commercials as well, representing the board and also helping there be more community awareness about the opportunities we have at the board. For now, that is the update for the recruitment status for the period of July 2023 to September 2023. You have any questions?
Chair, I welcome the board members to come with me at the Hawaii Chamber of Commerce Job Fair at the Neil Blaisdell Center late in November. Thank you.
Is that on Saturday?
It's on a Saturday.
If I can make it, I'm gonna come with you. I think I got a request from Kim.
Thank you.
Yeah, if I can make it up. Okay.
Thank you for your help.
Any discussion? Okay, thank you, Michelle. We appreciate your patience on this. And thank you for all the hard work.
No problem.
Thank
We're
you.
here anytime to help you folks out, trying to get as many people on with the Board of Water Supply as we can.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you so much. Okay, moving on to number 5, status update of groundwater levels at all index stations. Chair recognizes Barry Wasagawa. Thank you for your patience, Barry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. We have 9 aquifer index wells in low groundwater status as of September. In caution, we have Beretania, Kalihi, Maunalua, Pearl City, Waipahu, Kaluanui, and Wailua. In alert status, we have Punaluu. Kaimuki dipped into critical status, but chlorides are stable. Since then, we've cut back on 1 unit, and it's not in critical, but as of the writing of this letter, it was. So now it's out of critical, chlorides are still stable. Production for September was 147 million gallons per day, slightly less than what we experienced in August. Rainfall is still low, 62% of normal. 5-month moving average is 74%, so we're in this drying period. We're still looking at a below normal rainfall winter, at least through March now. So, and we're recommending that conservation messaging continues. So this is the rainfall graph there, anything below the red line on the 5-month moving average is drying, which we all know is still hot and dry. And if you drop down to the pumpage, so we are potentially turning that corner where, we're starting to get into the lower demand in the fall season. So, but we'll continue to monitor our index wells and pumpages and, react accordingly. So that's my report. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Any questions, members?
Thank you.
Yeah, Barry, maybe just a note, if you see that next dot go above, just let us know.
Yeah.
If you could.
Yeah.
I think that's important for us to work with Kathleen folks to really on the messaging.
Get the messaging out there.
People kind of wore off on the emergency status and.
Yeah.
Yeah, that coupled with the rainfall.
Yeah, good idea. Thank you very much.
Yep. Okay, and just a note ahead of time, I'm gonna defer executive session, including the approval of the minutes to the next meeting to get our East Coast staff and board member out on time, so you can get some rest. So this is number 6, water main report for September 23. Chair recognizes Jason Nikaido. Thank you, Jason, for your patience.
Good afternoon, board chair and board members. The following is the water main repair report for September. September saw another high month of main breaks. We had 53 main breaks in September for a total of 130 for the year. So we're currently trending higher than average. There's a list of all 53 main breaks, and again, the majority of them are on smaller diameter pipe. For leak detection, our leak detection team investigated 70 points of interest and found 108 leaks. So 13 of those leaks were on mains, and 12 of those main breaks were found by satellite leak detection. So between our leak detection team and the satellite leak detection, we're doing a good job of trying to be proactive in finding leaks. So we're already at 224 leaks found for the year so far, and that is also higher than average. And that could be contributing to the higher number of breaks as well, as they are finding more leaks on main lines.
You actually blew through the graph here.
Yes, we did.
Yeah. Okay.
Any questions?
Members, any questions? Hearing none. Thank you, Jake.
Thank you.
There is testimony from Mr. Pepper.
Yep.
All right, thank you, everyone, particularly those directors that volunteer your service, and Mr. Lau for your direction of the Board of Water Supply and safeguarding and providing the most vital resource for this community. I come here before you today as a homeowner and ratepayer without control of his water bill. Though 100% certainty is difficult to achieve, I am confident that leaks in my community's water delivery system are the root cause of the problem. My assertion is that something must fundamentally change to resolve the current situation. In the past 2 years, I've made multiple appeals to BWS for assistance. Each time I've been rebuffed. I'm here today in person to implore BWS to reconsider this matter and to work collaboratively with my community to engineer a solution that could benefit multiple communities in a similar situation and better conserve our precious water resources. To provide more context, I would like to provide a brief review of the current situation along with fundamental flaws. I live in a community of hundreds of individual, unattached, 2-story homes. Monthly water usage is measured by a single master meter. Tier charges are calculated using the number of homes as a factor in determining usage per home to produce a single community bill every month. In addition, the community is responsible for managing the multi-million-dollar subterranean water delivery system. Let me list some basic flaws with this current design. Number 1, it is an enemy of water conservation. It is estimated that homes serviced by a master meter tend to have at least 15 to 20% higher usage than homes with individual meters. In 2022, BWS calculated that the average monthly usage per home in my community should be about 10,000 gallons per month. Interestingly enough, that is 15% more than the average monthly usage for a single-family residential home of 9,000 gallons per month, as reported by Mr. David Ebersol at the June 2023 BWS board meeting. Anecdotally, the September usage for our community was 18,000 gallons per home per month. A master meter design also discourages individual conservation efforts like rain barrels because each ratepayer cannot realize the direct benefit of his efforts. At best, the community as a whole sees an insignificant benefit diluted across an entire community. Imagine the negative effects if HECO had a similar master meter design for the delivery of electricity to hundreds of unattached homes in a large community. Number two, the current design is an ally of disaster. With individual metering per home, ratepayers may quickly identify a leak they are responsible for when water usage and the associated bill go far beyond normal levels. Localization of the leak happens quickly, repairs can be completed expeditiously to reduce waste, and billing forgiveness may be applied appropriately. Without individual metering, personal responsibility is lost. Keeping the system in control becomes far more difficult, and leaks may not be found for months, and the potential for massive amounts of water waste skyrockets. In 2022, Board of Water Supply estimated that my community wasted over 393 million gallons of water in a 39-month span. To put that into context, in June of 2023, Mr. Ebersol reported the estimated savings for the residential conservation program efforts will total 772 million gallons for the entire life of the program. Further evidence of the potential for massive amounts of water waste can be seen when the peak usage for my community exceeded over 48,000 gallons per home for the month of December 2021. This is more than 5 times the average monthly usage for a single-family residential unit, as reported by BWS. Next, or point 3, the current rate plan is unfair. I was happy to hear the genuine concern for individual ratepayers, especially for our kapuna and those struggling to make ends meet, expressed by Mr. Lau and the Board of Directors during the June 2023 board meeting. In discussion of the rate plan, I was surprised to hear my community is placed in a single-family residential group. It is unfair that my community, which was made responsible for care and maintenance of a multi-million-dollar water delivery system, pays the same rates per individual home as other homes in a single-family residential rate class that do not have that huge responsibility. In essence, water is delivered to and metered at their doorstep without the responsibility for the water delivery system. Clearly, there is a distinction in the class of service provided by BWS that is inconsistent with the rates charged. It is my assertion that either my community has been overcharged for many years or has been underserved based on the rates paid for that time frame. Fourth, I believe the penalties levied are unfair. Tiering of charges per month based on level of usage is in place to make those choosing to use larger amounts of water responsible for paying a greater cost, which is fair. But when large amounts of water is leaked in a community, there is no choice made to use the larger amount of water. Still, the community is made responsible for paying the greater cost at a higher rate per gallon used. This is especially unfair to our kapuna and others who make concerted efforts to limit their water usage and conserve that precious resource. They are forced to shoulder the burden of a systemic problem. In addition, there is a legal precedent stating that charging sewer fees for water leaked into the ground and not returning to the sewer system is an unfair tax. Given that the sewer charges can be roughly double the water charges each month, this unfair charge is substantial. Fifth, intense pressure applied by Board of Water Supply made my community's situation worse. When the situation got out of hand in my community, BWS refused to provide much needed assistance. This allowed the problem to fester without movement toward a good long-term solution. Eventually, BWS applied so much pressure and threatening to stop water service that my community's board of directors was left with no other alternative but to sign a multi-million-dollar repair contract. Though initially water usage was reduced substantially, usage numbers have been climbing for the last 12 months. Despite millions of dollars spent, exhausting of association reserve funds, and a large outstanding loan balance, my community does not have a long-term solution to its water problem. To make matters worse, when my community saw initial reductions in water usage to near normal levels in 2022, BWS demanded immediate resolution of an outstanding billing balance. This placed intense financial strain on an already severely distressed financial situation. Finally, I'm concerned that the current situation is a violation of the public trust. As the purveyors of water, BWS has been entrusted by the public to protect and administer this most precious resource. I provided an example of the catastrophic nature of the problems that can occur if this model is not addressed and redesigned. There are multiple communities on Oahu that encounter similar difficulties in the near future if action is not taken. Furthermore, it is irresponsible to allow new communities to be built with a water delivery system that is managed by an ill-equipped community association. It seems to me that concerns about Red Hill were raised before catastrophe struck. Failure to act allowed a problematic situation to become worse, and the people of Oahu are now suffering for it. I urge the Board of Water Supply to collaborate with communities like mine to change their approach and to take immediate action to transition to a good long-term solution. Water delivery systems should be managed by an organization with water, engineering, construction, contracting, legal, project management, financial, regulatory, government, etc. expertise. BWS has those resources and my community association does not. As Mr. Lau stated during the June 2023 board meeting, the goal is to provide individual ratepayers more control over their water bill and to continue the expansion of conservation programs. In closing, I would like to make an earnest plea to Mr. Lau and the board of directors to follow through on these words and make a commitment to work collaboratively with communities like mine to engineer a good long-term solution for this problem. Mahalo.
Couple questions before you leave.
Yes, sir.
How long have you been a homeowner?
In this community?
In that community.
So I became a homeowner in 2013. I received a letter as a homeowner in 2021 saying that our association needed to take out a large loan. And then since.
And then how long have you been on the board?
I was elected to the board in 2022.
Okay, I really wish you'd been elected to the board earlier because.
I understand.
This has been on the plate for us as a board for this specific instance on the plate for the board for many meetings over many hours about what to do with this. And I think part of this is the fact that there was very little response by council or the association to help us to remedy it. We were watching the.
I completely agree.
The valve was wide open in the middle of the night, flowing through, I think, like 1 million gallons a day. I don't recall the.
I completely agree that our association is not at fault. The intention to this matter did not occur in a timely fashion. But I also stand by the statement that I make that volunteer board of directors for a community association are ill-equipped to manage a multi-million-dollar subterranean water delivery system. And though it's fortunate that maybe other communities like mine haven't hit this problem yet, I do suspect that this will become a major problem, especially with the number of communities serviced by master meter.
Yeah, it just depends on how these subdivisions are built and who takes responsibility. In this instance, the Board of Water Supply put a meter up at the front of the 600 and some odd homes, and that past that, the delivery system was taken on by the developer and then the homeowners as they bought.
Sure.
And that's just, I think that's just part of the cost of doing business and how some of these subdivisions are built. I would say that we worked really hard not to turn the water off. And at one point that was on the plate and it was during the pandemic. And this board decided not to do so, even though you folks were in arrears of, I think, like $12 million or something.
Not 12 million, but our high water mark was 3.3 million.
Yeah, there were several $1 million worth of, if I recall, I don't have the numbers in front of me. And I know you folks are still in high water use. We would encourage you to, and I circle number 3, creative ways to reduce water. In your previous testimony, I think it is important to note that you probably still have massive water leakage underground. I didn't see the report. I know they were supposed to report back to us at varying intervals as they went through the construction or the reconstruction of the water supply. as you went.
Right.
I don't know if they fixed all 600 some on laterals.
The plan was to replace all 612 laterals, which I found out, I think was an overstatement, and because many homes share laterals, so that number is really actually half of that probably, though we've been charged more. But the fundamental problem remains that replacing the main failure point doesn't provide leak detection. And that's the situation that we're in now. Even though we've spent millions of dollars to basically repair or replace the primary failure point, we are in the dark still as far as where the water's going and how it's being used and where the leaks could be.
And I'll wrap up and let Ernie go, but in the interest of time, I think it's important to note that like the responsibility of the Board of Water Supply stops at the meter.
Sure.
And that, there are a number of different ways in which we deploy water. Single family homes get a small meter. We read up to there, they're responsible for everything afterwards. I have a small meter, single family home, do that. And that in this instance, I think it's part of the, I would offer that this is part of the disclosures that come with, home buying, and that, I'm happy that you're here. I'm happy that you're an active board member. And I think that it's important for any multi-million-dollar housing solution to pay attention to these things, because we worked really hard to try to get the attention of either the lawyers or the association. I remember it really clearly because it was such large numbers, and people were really slow in responding to us in the meantime, going through hundreds of thousands of gallons a day.
Sure, and I totally understand where the Board of Water's point of view.
Yeah.
And I understand your legal protection under the law. I just feel as a member of the community, this is a problem that should be addressed for, not just for me. I got involved because me personally, that's my fees go up.
Yeah.
But I've seen this isn't just an individual problem or even a poorly managed association problem. This is a fundamental design problem in my estimation that should be addressed. And it's beyond the capacity of me, myself, the board of directors at our association, even the entire community of 612 homeowners to solve. It's just beyond our reach.
Yeah.
It's far beyond our reach. And
it was beyond ours as well. We only had a certain number of remedies, being that it wasn't our water system and that, we were responsible past the meter. I do want to just give Kapua or Ed or John an opportunity to say anything if they want to, and then I'll let Ernie go, but I know we're past time.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time this evening, Mr. Tupper, and your patience. Given the late hour, I don't feel like we have time to sufficiently get into all of the details that I would really like to right now. I feel like our chair has very politely responded to many of the issues that you've already raised. I would only like to make a couple of additional points. One, you should follow up with your developer. This is really their kuleana, and it's for someone who sat through all of the meetings with Chair Anthony and, our chief engineer, and we tried so desperately to reach out to your association, had no council, folks didn't even respond to our fees. I find it a little, I'm taken aback a bit by your tone this evening, not on my own behalf, but really more on behalf of our staff and on behalf of our chief engineer, because I feel like I need to stick up for him because he has done so much to try to work this out. And this is really more of an issue, as I said, that you need to be taking up with your developer. So given the late hour, I'm sure Chair Anthony and I would be happy to meet with you at a later date to talk through these issues, but I would encourage you, I know you're on the board more recently, I would encourage you to go back through all of the correspondence that we've had over many years, and to look at all of the aloha really that was extended to your individual development. So that's all I have to add.
I apologize for my tone if it sounds critical or exasperated or like I'm on my last rope. I do in some way feel like I chased this as hard as I could, as much as I could for the past 2 years when I wasn't on the board, and I reached out to the Board of Water. And maybe my frustration, which really should be appreciation for this Board of Directors group and for Mr. Lau, is more rooted in the fact that despite whatever efforts we have made, or I've made personally, or we've tried to make as an association once I became more involved, have all reached a dead end. There's nothing that I feel like we can do operating on our own to solve this problem. We have reached out to our developer. We are familiar with state law that basically lets them off the hook after 10 years, the statute of limitations for construction. We have looked at the opportunity of suing them, and that has not come into fruition just because of the likelihood that even after spending thousands of dollars, it wouldn't be an award in our favor.
So look, I'm gonna double down on Kapula's offer. I'll be happy to sit with you and go back through the correspondence if that's something that is helpful. I think moving forward is probably more helpful and looking at different ways that we can get your water bill down to a sizable measure. One of the important tools, I think, is what their water use is at night. I don't know, Ernie, if you can have staff pull that report so we understand at 2 a.m. how much water is flowing.
Right, sure.
Right, which gives you a really decent opportunity to understand how much more is still leaking in the system and then what you're gonna do.
And that was my hope coming here today. It's not to litigate what's happened in the past, but more to look at for a creative way to change the current approach to come up with a better a way to move forward.
I'll put an asterisk next to it, the Board of Water Supply guys aren't gonna touch anything past the meter.
I understand that.
You know, an abundance of caution and just the legal.
But in exploring creative ways, one thought I had is if individual Board of Water meters were placed on every home, is there a way to transition the management of the water delivery system to an entity that's equipped to do it as opposed to leaving it in the hands of a community that's not?
That's actually, so you can put sub-meters in on anything, like apartment buildings do it all the time, but those are not Board of Water meters. Those are
Understood.
Meters to understand how many gallons go past.
Understood. And I kind of, in considering that solution, I see a difficulty in that if our sub-meter numbers don't add up to what the Board of Waters meter, we still have an issue with leak.
Chair Sniffen.
Yeah, sorry to bother. It sounds like, and just from my hearing this, it sounds like a private entity wants the board to take on its infrastructure, which would be problematic from my perspective. Looking at the situation like this, the board doesn't know the condition the infrastructure is in. The board doesn't know the risks on taking on that infrastructure. And it would be, from my perspective, and this is one board member's perspective, it would be unfair to the ratepayers that are already in the system. But that being said, I live in a subdivision that's like exactly like you're explaining right now, but I know what I bought into. So I know that what the risk that I was taking when I bought into it. That being said, as a board member, it'd be very difficult for me to support the board taking on infrastructure that wasn't as clearly on there from the beginning, because it now puts all the other state ratepayers at risk.
Yeah, I just want to say that, thank you, Mr. Tupper, for coming out again. And
thank you for your patience.
Yeah, no, I agree with what the board members have said. Everybody said shared, but I also know that we're kind of monitoring new technologies, and although the accuracy of some of these new technologies may be questionable, I think, but some of them may be useful to let you know if there's a leak or not.
Right.
And be able to focus on targeted replacements within your own plumbing or within your subdivision beyond the water meter that could help control your water usage. So we'll reach out to you and set a separate meeting and we can talk about different opportunities. We do have a expanded rebate program into smart monitoring systems. And although the accuracy may be questionable, and what we want to be careful is not to give you the impression that something like that could be used to challenge our water bill, because our water meters have to meet industry standards for accuracy. But they could be useful indicators to tell you where leaks are within your own plumbing systems. That you could do targeted replacement that'll reduce your costs and do it just in time, as opposed to kind of going through the whole 612.
Right.
But we'll follow up with Mr. Tupper and talk about maybe options to collaborate and to see how we can maybe make suggestions that the association might want to consider.
Once again, I want to show my appreciation to the board and you, Mr. Lau, and apologize for any ill will that you may have felt from me. And also, thank you for your aloha.
Well, thank you. This is the first time I've met you in person, so we'll be talking soon.
Thank you so much for your time and attention. I know I ran long.
Mr. Tupper, I have one additional thing. You made some allegations with regard to the illegality of the sewer charges. So that is not the board's kuleana. And so you should follow up with the appropriate agency with regard to that. That's appended as part of our water bill, but we don't have any kuleana over that. So to the degree that you with the sewer charges, you can take that up with the appropriate folks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Can I have thank you, Mr. Tupper.
Thank you so much.
Can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? So moves. Thank you, John.
Second.
Moves. Seconded. Any discussion? Can I get a roll call vote, please?
Chair, Vice Chair Capuano,
Aye.
Board Member Francie Palachiro,
Aye.
Board Member Ed Sniffen,
Aye.
and Chair Nale Huanui.
Aye.
Chair motion passes with 4 ayes.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you very much.